It's crazy.
Yeah. So at least with if I just use sound, I can give the illusion of like I'm high quality and professional and that. But like with video, I need like a studio and like background and good quality. It's just, and I don't make
And
enough money for this to do
no,
it.
it's not just that, but it's smart too because
Yeah.
in my line of work, for example, now I have my own production company and I'm making my own content for my website too.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what camera I use for filming?
Just
I use the iPhone.
the iPhone.
Yeah, I use an iPhone as a film because it makes 4K videos. And you know what? I have made much more
Yeah.
in terms of money, in terms of everything, instead of investing in lights, I don't use that. I use natural light. Okay, I have to work more. I cannot do it anytime I want to, but just still, I'm putting in less to get out the maximum.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the way to do it now. Why? If you could save a lot, why would you invest so much money into camera, into like, and it also doesn't look that good either. I think because it
Yeah.
looks sort of like fake, and this is why I prefer podcasts that look professional but don't give me the feeling that I'm in a clinical setting.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Because then I
agree.
completely tune off because I'm like, you know what, this is same old if I can say this bullshit. And it takes away the attention from the actual topics.
Yeah.
Um, so it's good anyway to do it this way.
I think so.
And I've seen some of your podcasts actually in the past because before, I was very much involved with the atheist community. And I've been traveling and working so much that I haven't had that much time to interact and discuss some of these topics. But yeah, I've seen your rise as well, your success, and I have to say hats off to you.
Thank you, Yasmina. That's so sweet.
Yeah, because I was like, wow, Lalo, you have a lot of followers and all these interactions you have with all these different types of people. I have to say, wow, you have patience.
Yeah. It does take a lot of patience. But I don't know. I wasn't taking it as seriously, like because it was like 3 years ago. We got online about the same time, didn't we?
Yeah,
About
2014 actually.
2014. Yeah. So I should
Yeah,
introduce, like, I'll start already and I'll introduce you. So I'm speaking with Yasmeena Ali,
yeah,
and Yasmeena,
yeah.
we have known of each other for almost 4 years now, but I don't think we've ever spoken one on one.
No, actually, yeah, we've had like exchanges,
Yeah.
tweets, but somehow I think we wanted to, and we just, I don't know, we just didn't have the opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I mean, also like when we first met, it was we were in this very messy group where there was a lot of chaos and drama, and it was I don't know about you, but I wasn't taking it as seriously back then when we first met. So I kind of wanted to do something like more professional down the road, and have this podcast. And then I've seen you also evolve, through Twitter, and it's been interesting, following you.
Yeah, I know, right?
Because
I know.
to where
I
you are
want to.
today. So, and I've kind of seen it, right? Like I've seen you just like first like
Yes.
starting using social media, and you also started seeing me using social media when I was just messing around
Yeah,
more.
were like
So
we were babies.
yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
were
were
babies
babies.
online. We both saw each other evolve, so that was kind of fun. But I've seen you like now grow into this. I mean, what you do now, you also do so professionally, and you're in it. But so, let's move down the road. But I want to, know your story. But way back before I met you, right from
Yes,
the beginning, I want to know your whole story, if I can. Is that okay?
yes, yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Well, my story would take hours to explain, but I will try to really,
Don't
let's say,
don't
cut it
condense
down.
it. Don't cut it down too much though, because I'm gonna have a lot of
No, not too
questions.
much. I know. But if you
Yeah.
have any questions, please go ahead.
Okay.
It's just that, my story is quite complex.
All right.
There are all these different factors, and there's so much. So I have a lot of experience that helps me now, of course, and I can help other people with. But it's just, I don't think I'll be able to finish talking about it in one podcast, but I'll do my best. But I will start right from the beginning, from the time I was born. I think that's the easiest part to start from. Well, actually from Afghanistan. I was born in Kabul in '93. And, around this time, the Taliban were taking control over the country. And so girls were banned from school. There was a lot of chaos in Afghanistan. Also, for the past 20, 30 years, there's only been like civil war, basically. And so I was born in a very bad time. And I had seen the way religion manifested itself in such a society. My parents are both educated. So it's not like they're from some town somewhere and they have no idea about what's going on in the world. They're very educated, university educated. My father is a doctor. My mother studied nursing. So, I grew up with a very educated background. So yeah, I was born there. And when I was around 9 years old, we left. So me, my mother and my siblings, because my father had already left before, like 2, 3 years before, we left for the UK. And we went to Iran, and from Iran, we went to England. And so I didn't wear a hijab at that time because in Afghanistan, if you're a little girl, you don't look like a teenager. If you don't have breasts, let's say, or curves, basically you don't look like a woman. They characterize a woman by like how big she is. Basically, it's crazy. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm just letting you go. But
okay.
so when it comes to the hijab, what they're looking for is like the shape of your body to cover up, basically.
Well, I just wanted to go into that. That's an interesting question. So basically, in Afghanistan, I did not wear the hijab.
Yeah.
Because I was seen as a child. Like I was 6, 7 years old. And even at 9, I looked quite young. I was very slim. I didn't look older for my age. I looked very young for my age. So I didn't have to wear the hijab, but of course I couldn't just walk around wearing shorts or anything to show I couldn't show my legs, but still, the wind was in my hair and I could still run around and play, even though I wasn't allowed to go to school. But as a child, you don't really think about these things, you don't really say, oh, why aren't we, you don't really think of the bad aspects. You wonder what's happening, but you can't put your finger on it. And as soon as we came to the UK, we had to wear so the hijab was forced on me by my parents.
So can I ask you, like, your parents were pretty religious, even though they were educated people?
This is why also I thought it would be interesting to go into this too. My parents weren't that religious in the beginning, because they grew up in communist Afghanistan. So, they believed, of course, they prayed, but they didn't pray 5 times a day, it was sort of like now and then or whenever they could, but it wasn't like, oh, you have to pray. They like, my parents were religious, but not radical, so it was sort of like culturally religious, and not religiously religious. I don't know how to put it.
I keep
into
running
words.
into to Westerners who are shocked to always when they find out that there are any Muslims who are communists in the Middle East. Historically.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Some people have no idea. They think the combination of communist and Muslim must be impossible. But actually, especially during this time, like in between the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, there was very big communist movements in a lot of the Middle Eastern countries.
Yeah, that's the thing is, there are certain aspects of communism that works with Islam. Just the only part that doesn't work is the atheism part. But it's sort of this community, this sort of ummah mentality, and the social. I'm not saying that it's a good aspect of Islam, but there are certain aspects that religions can easily use to their advantage. And my parents grew up in this time, and my mother didn't wear the hijab when she was growing up, so she only wore it later on, like in her adulthood. Like by adulthood, I mean when she was married, like at the age of 19 or so. But before that, she did not wear the hijab because she didn't have to wear the hijab. And my father too, he didn't have a beard or anything like that. He was very sort of like easygoing man, but he got radicalized, I think, in a prison when he was arrested for protesting against actually the government, the communist government. So can you believe it? On one side, my father wasn't religious, but he was protesting against uh, a government that wasn't so religious. Um, and so, when they came to the UK, they started turning more religious because there was a conflict of culture, conflict of everything, and I think they started to isolate themselves from the rest of the environment, enforcing their beliefs on their children, um, and they held on to these dark beliefs because they're in a stranger's land. I think it's a phenomenon that happens with immigrant backgrounds, that when the parents come over, they turn more Catholic than the Pope.
Right. Can I
Um,
ask you there?
you know,
Did when you say they became more religious and they weren't integrating as much, did you see that they were doing it to also integrate more with the Muslim community that there was?
when we came, there wasn't much of a Muslim community. So we came to East London. And in East London, there were, of course, some Indian families and some Pakistani families, but they were for generations there. So it wasn't that they just came immediately. So we were basically refugees. And there wasn't much of a community because where we were living, the school that I went to, basically I was the only girl in the entire school wearing a hijab. This was in 2000 and late 2002, basically.
So was it then
Can you
to
imagine?
then it wasn't to integrate into a Muslim community? Was it then more an identity aspect that this is the Islam is more what makes like
This is
from
identity.
our
Yeah.
identity? So is that an identity issue that they became more religious in England?
I think that, and also, for the first time, you're conflicted with a different environment than what even no matter if you grew up in communist Afghanistan. But look, you meet people from different religions. This is not possible in Afghanistan. You meet people, you see women wearing whatever they want to, and they are afraid. Religious people have this fear. They're very fearful of things that they don't know, fearful of the unknown, of doubts and everything, and sort of clinging on to the past. That's how they felt, that they identified themselves by their religion. So the first thing that I was told when I went to school was, if anybody asks you, who you are, why you wear the hijab and everything, just say you're Muslim. So that's how I would introduce myself, that I'm Muslim. Instead of saying, hey, my name is this, I come from this place, nice to meet you. Instead of talking about what you like, I had to talk about my religion, and also, my parents told me, when you're going to the lunch, to the canteen, if they give you any food, tell them no pork. Those were the few words that I had learned in English. No pork, I'm Muslim. And my that's how it slowly started. And then my parents sent me to mosque with my other siblings, um because in the mosque was the only place that they knew they could be closer to the religion. But we got kicked out because you know in Afghanistan, I didn't pray, and the stories of Muhammad that I heard, or of Islam, were more like fairy tales than actual beliefs. So when my grandmother used to tell me about Muhammad, or my parent or my mother, I would just say, oh, okay, whatever. But I didn't see the connection of this man from a desert with my life in Afghanistan. As a child, I didn't see this. I didn't know the point of, like, my first question was, who is Muhammad? Why is he important at all for us? Um, and we got kicked out of mosque because we asked this question.
That's a
So
really basic question to get kicked out for.
yeah, I know, because they thought we were making fun of the religion, and even though, and we didn't speak English much when we started going to mosque. But I was curious. I was like, look, um, what the hell is this? Somewhere in Arabia. I mean, I've never seen this place. I don't know who this guy is. I had genuine questions because, when you've never been to school before, also from my perspective, I wasn't allowed to go to school. So I had no idea. I had no structure to my thoughts. So I was very carefree, basically, with my thinking. But slowly, more and more Muslim families came to the same area because they heard, there's another Muslim family there. Why don't we go there? And slowly, 10 years later, you see like it's the other way around. You see more women with their hijabs than not with hijabs. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is that when you go out, you're looked down upon. People stare at you if you're wearing tight clothes. It's just a very toxic environment. So yeah, I would say my parents definitely suffer from identity crisis, and also from they will have no control over their children, because in Afghanistan, when you have children, they belong to you. There is this sort of mentality, like whatever that child does, they have to do what I say, and the moment they don't, they dishonor me. So it's like this. So my parents were afraid of this, so they became even more, I think, even more radical in their beliefs.
It's interesting, like also the switch in your identity, that you're in Afghanistan, not very religious, not in a hijab, and then you get to England, and then suddenly you have to become more religious, go to mosque, and wear a hijab. So it's
That's it.
completely out of place. So it sounds, yeah, it's very interesting, the evolution there.
Yeah, and so that mosque we were kicked out, and then we were kicked out from another mosque too. So, in terms of religious, my involvement with religious wasn't so good. And then slowly, I had no choice but to wear the hijab, and I had no choice but to wear the clothes that I was told to wear, like the abaya, and to wear modest clothing. And
You had to wear an
I had to
abaya. You
go.
had to cover your face.
Abaya is basically not, that's the niqab. But the abaya is the complete, the black robe.
Yeah, yeah. It's one entire black robe that goes over you, but doesn't it have a
Yeah, but
face? I thought an abaya also had a face covering. It doesn't.
uh, it can actually, but
Uh,
it's not necessary. Not all abayas are like this.
oh, okay.
But some are, because when you're going to school, you kind of cover your face. So
Mm.
out of like the rules, my parents couldn't cover my face because they knew I would not be allowed in school. But I think if they had the option to, they would have. They would have said it. But yeah, I had to cover my hair. When I went to swim, I mean, I was in a girls' school, and for swimming, my parents said, "Okay, you can go swimming, but the burqini,
Yeah.
something like this. It wasn't a burqini; it was more like surface clothes, and I wore this to a swimming class full of girls. And and you're just what, 12 years old. I mean, there are no boys, no nothing, and still I had to cover up. Um, and I remember my PE teacher saying, "Oh, why did you're coming here dressed as a surfer? We're not going on a surfing lesson." And I just laughed it off, but I couldn't tell her that what, I have no choice. Um, and slowly, the other thing is that my parents also brainwashed me in this time, that although I was very uh, much of an atheist as a child, the older I got, the more brainwashed I became, because you have this prison mentality. You accept your slavery because you feel like there is no way out, and you start, the lies that you are being told, the more you repeat them, it turns into truth. So this is, the more often the more you tell yourself a lie, the more you believe it. And this is exactly what happened to me. So I was brainwashed by my parents to believe in religion. And I was like, yeah, you know what, I started believing in God. Not that I said there was no God before, but I just had no belief. Started believing in Muhammad, and then I was accepted in a mosque finally. I mean, at that time, I was thinking, finally, I'm accepted, because I didn't know how to read Arabic, and everybody around me could read, and I was sort of like, "Hey, Yasmeena, why can't you read Arabic? You're 16 years old and you can't even read." So I felt the pressure of the society. So I was like, okay, I have to learn how to read. And I started reading it, and I, started to repeat like a mantra to myself, the verses to make myself feel better. And I was in this circle, this vicious circle.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, also, the way I never looked at my body in the mirror. I didn't think about going out or having fun, because for me it was like non-negotiable. And even like fighting to go to university was a struggle, because my brother didn't want me to go to university, because he said I'm going to be mixing with boys. And I had to beg my parents. I was like, please let me go, because what am I going to do? Look, you will have my timetable. They had my timetable. They knew what I was doing. They would check my phone every single day. I couldn't come home after 5,
Mm-hmm.
so I had to be on time. I used to wear trousers, and then my brother said, look, you're wearing tight jeans. Tomorrow you're not allowed to wear this. And as of that day, I was wearing the abaya. And I felt increasingly, I became religious from the age of like 12 to 18, I would say. During this period, I was religious. I joined Twitter in 2010, because I felt like, oh my God, Twitter is this place to meet people, discuss things, and I started defending Islam.
You first got on Twitter as an Islam apologist? I didn't know that.
Yes, actually,
I didn't know that.
yes. Because I started believing, because I was afraid, the more religion instills fear in you. I was told, oh, you're going to go to hell, you're going to burn. And when you tell this to like a 12-year-old, or from the age of 9, let's say, I was afraid. I was like, oh my God, this is going to happen to me. This is what I was feeling. So I was brainwashed.
Can I ask you a question before that? You said you were kind of an atheist before that, but you were brought up in a religious family. So how were you kind of an atheist? Were you just kind of naturally inquisitive and curious and skeptical, or why was that?
Yes, it was that, because I didn't say. I clearly remember that I was actually a very curious child. I didn't accept somebody telling me a story just like this, and also because I don't when I used to make dua as a child in Afghanistan, it wasn't because I believed in it. It was only because my parents told me, okay, you have to memorize this. And I just said, okay, I memorize it. But it wasn't important to me. It wasn't that I believed in it.
Can you explain dua?
Dua is prayer. The word dua means prayer. So it's like, when you go to church and you start praying and you start singing the hymns, and the idea of dua is like you supplication. And you have to read it in Arabic. And in the hadith, there are so many duas, and can you believe it? You're expected to memorize all these different verses. So I had memorized 1 or 2, but I can't remember now. But I didn't believe in them. I was like, okay, I memorized it just because I want to get this over and done with and go out and play. But I never genuinely believed in it. This is why I say I'm an atheist, because I didn't say that there is no God. I just lacked a belief. That's how I was as a child. And of course, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't see it necessary to tell anyone. When somebody would tell me something, I'll be like, oh, okay, but why? And I was seen as the smarty pants, and sort of like, not you again, sort of like, not these questions again, just memorize and that's it, and be gone with you, so because I was a nuisance as a child. So that's why I say I was kind of an atheist, but I was an atheist without knowing what atheism means, without the label of atheism.
Right.
Now
Yeah.
I'm aware of the different types of philosophy. Now I've made a conscious choice. I've processed my thoughts, but as a child, I didn't think of there being a creator. I didn't think, like, when I looked at the trees and stuff, I didn't think, oh, who created this? I just admired the beauty of the plants, of the river, but I didn't once say, oh, God created this. I didn't think this.
Oh, so you were like
That,
me when you were really young, because I also I was never religious, and then so it wasn't for me when I was young that I never had like a moment like that people talk about where they realized there was no God. No, I realized there were, like, when I was very young, my moment of realization was that there were people who were religious, and that to me was shocking. And so, but
yeah,
I never hold, like, a lot of people define atheism as like real, like people realizing suddenly there is no God, so they go from religious to non-religious, or it's the denial of God. But I mean, what do you call that in my case, or now I realize it's your case, where you, I mean, you're an atheist before you even know the concept of God, and then when you know the
I think,
concept, you don't take it literally, and then I was shocked that there was anybody who took it literally.
yeah, same here. For me, it was just some strange alien culture that's been, like, in Afghanistan, it's quite a traditional and quite a nationalistic people,
Mm-hmm.
Afghans. And so, as a child, okay, I don't know what being Afghan meant, but everything surrounding me, there is no desert, there is no guy called Muhammad. There is just, I know there is a so-called sacred place that you have to cover when you go and pray. And for me, that was sort of like a tradition, but I didn't know it was religion. Um, I, like you, basically. I think this is atheism, and you don't need to have the label atheism on it. Uh, for me, atheism just means lack of a belief. Like, there is no evidence. For me, my atheism is not that I suddenly converted. It's gonna be another form of belief. Then, when I say I don't believe in a God, it's sort of another belief. There is no evidence for me to support a omniscient being or whatever. There is no evidence, so it's like, I don't know how to describe it, actually. There's not sufficient evidence for these claims, so therefore it's irrelevant.
Right. And
That's how I take it.
and when you became religious, so were you, did you like Islam? Because it sounded like you were saying, like, it was kind of forced on you and is a little bit out of fear. But did you
Yeah.
become very religious out of, like, you enjoyed Islam and you wanted to spread Islam and you started to
You,
get into it, or was it only something you felt forced to do? Which, like, I'm kind of
you
not
know,
sure what
it
those
was,
two.
I think it's a little bit of all, actually. I was forced to do it, but as a child, I mean, as a teenager, I didn't realize it. The older I became, the more obvious it became to me that, oh my God, all these things that I've been told, my parents are basically forcing their opinions and their views, beliefs on me, but they call it love, you know? And you're conflicted. Your parents are like, if you don't love me, whatever, then you have to love me, you have to do what I say. And as a child and also as a teenager, I was a very peaceful person, a pacifist, I would say. I didn't harm other beings, I didn't think bad of them, as a child. And so for me, it was like, okay, I do it because why would they think bad for me, you know why would they do this to me? Because I would not think of doing this or instilling fears, telling other people how to live their lives. Why would they tell me? They cannot, because they love me, so it was sort of this denial. And the other thing is that, when you're brainwashed, you start, because Islam is sort of a religion that has to you have to preach it. You have to spread the word of Islam. That's how it works. Islam was spread by the sword. It cannot survive. Like, in Judaism, you have, there aren't that many people who believe in Judaism, because it's very hard to convert to Judaism. You have to question even their, you're expected to question the scripture, but this is the one thing that's lacking in Islam. You're meant to accept everything, actually. You cannot even question a single word of the Quran or the Hadith. Otherwise, you will be known as a kafir, as an infidel apostate, and the punishments. for those for blasphemy, so you when you're brainwashed, you do it because you have nothing else to live for. For me, I knew, okay, there's no way I will have freedom. I'm just stuck here in this body, in this life, in this family, in this religious environment. Nobody's gonna help me. This is what I thought, and there's nothing else for me to fight for other than this. This is because you truly start believing your own your weakness. You start believing accepting your situation. You start accepting your slavery. When people say, why didn't African Americans escape or fight against? It's easy to say, but it is extremely hard to do. Fight against their owners, the white owners. Or why don't if you're in a domestic abuse situation in a Western society, in a European relationship even, it's very hard for those women or for those men even to leave those relationships, because you are told, my parents would tell me, it is my fault, I'm the one to blame. They would blame me, and they would say, there's nobody's going to help me, and I felt helpless, and I would try to blame it on me. Then I was thinking, maybe it is really my fault that this and this happened, or maybe because I'm not believing, or maybe because I'm not being religious enough, that such and such things happen. So it's like, some people in America, when there's a hurricane, they blame gays. It's sort of like this. So my parents would blame me or anyone who wasn't praying enough, saying, we have a bad situation right now, or it's not a good situation for us because you guys are not praying and being good, pious Muslims. And I felt very loyal to my parents. I was like, I don't want to cause them harm. I don't want to cause them upset. Then I will pray. So yeah, that's how it became. But the older I became, the more intolerant the situation became for me as a woman, because I was expected to do the cleaning, the cooking. I was treated like a house slave. My phone was checked, my timetable as well. Even though I was going to a university, I couldn't mix with the opposite sex, so I couldn't even have any number of a guy on my phone.
How about your own sex? I kind of wanted to ask you about that. Even through high school and then later on, what did your friendship circle look like? Were you able to make friends at least with other Muslim girls, or did you have any friends who were British, who were not Muslim at all, who you could see?
When I was in primary school, when I started, I was the only girl with the hijab. So no, I had friends, but they were like from a white Christian background or from a black Christian background. But when I went to a girls' school, my inner circle was just mainly Muslims, and mainly those who were wearing hijabs. So that was my inner circle. So, I didn't have any conflicting or different views. I wasn't exposed to different views. I sort of like, when you're told a lie, that lie is reinforced by other people believing in the same lie. So my classmates will be like, oh, by the way, have you heard this nasheed? Nasheed is a religious song. Or have you read this chapter in the Quran? It's so beautiful, and I'm sitting there and I don't know how to read Arabic, and you feel kind of like they're like ashamed, because you're made to feel bad that you're not being a good Muslim. So that's how, you become even more religious in such circle. But the moment I went to university, it became a little bit different, because I was exposed to really a vast number of people from non-Muslim backgrounds. And there was a guy that I did a campaign with for the representative of the year, and he was an atheist actually. And his mother was Muslim, from a Muslim background, but she was an atheist. He told me this. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And I had never ever come across such a story, And I was like, wow, that's really, how does that even work? I didn't know it was possible to leave the religion, because you are told, anyone who leaves the religion is a traitor. is an infidel. They're with the Christians and the Jews, and they're fighting against us. They will kill us. Don't trust them. This is what I was told. So I was sort of like in the beginning suspicious of other people. As a child, not, but as a teenager, I was like suspicious of everyone, thinking they're all after me, or they're thinking bad of me. But around this time when I was in university, I also fell in love. So that's when things started to really change in my life.
But and before that, were you on Twitter talking about Islam? You were saying?
Yes, I was defending Islam, because I joined in 2010, and when I left my parents' home, it was 2013. So 3 years. In these 3 years, I was really defending Islam because I was buying everything people were telling me, They're saying, everybody's after Muslims and there is this genocide. And I was, without even checking, I started to really believe in those things. I was like, oh my God, it's true then, what they're telling me at home, And I would really go and fight with right-wing assholes online, fighting with them for no reason at all. Just because I was like, oh my God, that's the only weapon I have is to fight with my words. But my parents did not know I had Twitter because I knew they would disapprove, even if I was defending Islam. So I actually hid it from them because I knew that if they find out what I'm writing about, they might not like it that I'm interacting with opposite sex, even though if it's about Islam.
Right. And
so
did they even know what Twitter was in 2010 though?
They didn't know. They didn't know what Twitter was, so they found out I had Twitter, but not this Twitter. Because when I was in university, I had the idea of making a second Twitter account, and on the second Twitter account, I made, because my mother was like, "Why are you always on your phone?" And I was like, "I'm reading the news,"
Yeah.
And I always
in 2010 you could get away with that. Now no parents will believe you. Now everybody's on to their kids.
I was like, you know what? I'm reading the news, and I was smart enough to have all those different tabs open. And back in the days, I don't know how it is now with Twitter on the app. I use it, but I've never removed my account. I've logged in, and I've just, I don't need to sign out. But back then, when you swipe from right to left, you can remove your account without logging out. So it was easier for me if I do swipe it. My parents will see, oh, there's a Twitter app, but there's no account to see. So I had the idea of making a second account, and that was my innocent account where there was no discussions, only talking about, hey guys, time for a coffee or going to the library, reading a book. It was something innocent. No discussions, no nothing. So when they told me, I see, what is this Twitter thing, I was like, yes, I have a Twitter account. If you want, you can follow me. So I showed them, and they were like, okay, we'll let you off this time, Mm-hmm. But they wouldn't have approved of my other account, of me interacting with different people, even if I was defending Islam. They even forbade me from going to a protest, a pro-Palestinian protest, because they said, what are women doing in such a protest? You should stay at home. So this is what my parents told me. And I was like, but you know what? You are talking about fighting for the religion, and supporting people from this religion. So why aren't you going then? Mm-hmm. I don't get it. So I didn't get this as well. So they wanted to control me both ways. But on my other account, I had really interesting discussions and stuff. And it was on this account actually that I met my partner. Now, basically, we're married now, and we've been with each other for more than 5 years. It's amazing how time flies, right? So we met, and yeah.
No, I was going to ask you. Did you meet him through Twitter?
Yes.
Interesting.
Through that account.
And this was and you met you met him through that account on Twitter, and that was when you were still Muslim?
That was when I was still Muslim, yeah.
Wow.
And I knew I was kind of suspicious of him in the beginning because he had a skull as a picture, and in his bio he had written the following: vegan, feminist, Zionist, atheist.
Wow.
So
Wow.
My mind exploded, because I had a discussion with some guy, right-wing guy, who was basically critiquing Islam, but I saw it as an attack on me, you know. And the guy who I had a discussion with, he also attacked me personally in the tweets. And my partner, he had seen, his name is David, by the way. He had seen, uh, he had come across by accident this through this discussion. He has come across this discussion that I was having, and he didn't know me, by the way. And he joined in, and he was trying to help me defend me in my arguments, you know, even though he was an atheist. But he was saying, hey, look, why are you picking on a woman, you know, sort of like this. Like Stace, he was telling the guy, let's not use swear words, keep it civilized. And then I attacked him. I attacked him in the conversation. I was like, who are you coming here? Because I had judged him on his bio. The moment I had seen the skull and I read atheist Zionist, you know, my mind exploded. And I was like, what the fuck? He's an enemy. You know, this is the first thing I thought.
The most radical thing there for me is the vegan part. I see that and I would already be triggered today if I saw that.
I was triggered by the Zionist and atheist part more. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell, right? What the F? And somehow we had come across each other, and we didn't follow each other immediately, by the way. So we came across each other again through another discussion and another one and another one. And, you know, then there was this Boston bombing. Do you remember?
Yeah.
In 2013?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, that must be an inside job. I thought this, you know, because my parents were like, whenever there's a terrorist attack, my parents would always say it's an inside job. And they would never blame the Muslims. And then they would say, you know what, I'm glad they did. This is what my parents would say, you know.
Did they say that about the Boston bombing as well?
Yeah, they did. They said, you know what, they were kafirs anyway. This is what they said. They were infidels anyway, so who cares? This is how they were, you know. Mm-hmm. In the open, they will never say this. That's the thing. In your face, they won't say it, but behind closed door, they will be like, you know what, they're going to hell anyway. This is what they would say. I felt like, you know what, if this is true what they did, I can't believe they did this, killing innocent people. But who knows? What if they were set up? This is what I thought, you know.
I've heard this a lot, and I think it might confuse people about you know, the idea that there's this double face. But I hear it so much from people who were brought up Muslim or were in Muslim families that,
you know, they will never tell. You know, it's not.
They're not upfront about their beliefs to non-Muslims, but behind closed doors in the mosque, they speak one way, very fundamentalist, very strong, and then suddenly they dumb it down or they make it more peaceful to the non-believers.
Yeah, you know, and in Islam, it's permissible to not tell the truth, basically. Because you are basically defending, for them, it is seen as an attack on the religion. So for them, it's a war. It is really a war. The moment you're helping the opposition side, you are basically being disloyal, a traitor. So what do you have to do? Whatever it takes to hide the intentions, you have to do. It's sort of like you are a warrior. You are, you know, a soldier of this religion. So that's you can tell a lie. You're allowed to, actually. So this is what my parents would say, and they would tell me not to tell anyone in university my views or anything or what I'm thinking out loud, because they said, oh, maybe the Mossad are there. You know?
Maybe the Mossad are there. Yeah.
Or the CIA. And I was like, but who would care about you? Tell me. You know, I was thinking, why would what I think be so important, you know? So, and anyway, not only that, but this paranoia, you know, it really mentally kills you. You cannot be happy always being paranoid about your best friend. Let's say your friend was Christian, and you always have this paranoia. What if there's tomorrow, you know, where he betrays me, or then he will show his true colors. You know, you can never trust somebody who's not a Muslim. You live with this, you know, and from my parents were like this too. So with this, you know, whenever there was a bad, whenever there was like a bombing or something, you know, my parents would say, look, they were like, that's not they're not real Muslims. At first they will say, you know what, they would not know real Muslims, and I was like, but they just declared their faith, then my father would say, yeah, they attack us in Afghanistan, Iraq, so we can do, it's legitimate in Islam to do jihad. But he would never tell his views outside, so they actually condoned those acts without being open about it.
It's interesting about the dynamic there about terrorism, that they would say that the terrorists, they're not real Muslims, and they would disconnect from the terrorists, and that might be the voice that they express to the larger community. But then there's the second part where it's, well, but even if they were, they had it coming, and they're the infidel, and they've attacked us in Afghanistan. So there's all this extra layer on it that people might not assume is the thinking of people when they hear that's not real Islam, these people are not really Muslim.
It is real Islam, and even my parents would say, and it's not just that, but in the mosque they tell you about the Muhammad's basically genocidal conquest. They don't tell me this way, but they say it's good. They teach you about the different wars that Muhammad led, about all these different things. And imagine telling this. Can you imagine the impact it has on you growing up? Why do you think so many people are when you look at ISIS, there were a lot of foreign fighters, just because those children, they used to, as kids or maybe as teenagers, they were radicalized in mosques or by their parents, because they grow up with this mentality, because for them, it's sort of like in love, everything is fair game, but in religion, everything is fair game. It's sort of like that mentality. So whatever they could use against the enemy is the infidel, the kafirs. It's acceptable. Even if it's suicide, they will see it as a last resort, and they will say, you know what, they left us no choice, so who cares, and then they say, but they'd never mourned Muslims dying, so why should we mourn their deaths? This is what they would tell us. And so around this time, around the Boston bombing, I wrote to him, I DM'd him saying, oh my God, do you think this is an inside job? And you know what? We went into really like a lot of different discussions, like religious discussions. And I was surprised that David, he knew a lot about Islam. I was like, how do you know about Islam? All these different things, because he lived in Algeria as well once, and he's very much well aware of Islam. He has read the Quran, the Hadiths, and I was surprised. I was like, I've never met a Westerner who knows so much about Islam. He knew more than me, basically. And I was like really fascinated, and I was like, then why don't you believe in it? This is the word of God. This is what I told him. Can you believe it? And so we really went into a lot of discussions, philosophy, literature. And then, I started slowly a little, and I always held back myself. I was like, I don't even know this guy. He's asking me, hey, how I'm doing, whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, should I trust him to tell him a little bit about myself? He told me about himself. I haven't told him anything about myself, because I was suspicious of him. And then I was like, slowly, you know what? I don't care. I will tell him, what harm is there? I'm not doing anything wrong just by talking to somebody. And I told him a little bit about myself, saying, hey, I'm studying in London. I come from this place and blah, blah, blah. So we started talking more and more. And one day we find out we have fallen in love. And David also from a Jewish background, which makes things worse. So I was like, oh shit, now that oh my God, I love this guy. What do I do? My parents, and increasingly my parents were becoming even more religious because they had gone to Hajj. And so they became even more religious. So on pilgrimage, they became even more religious. And increasingly, I was reaching the age of a ripe age, as it's called, for marriage, and they were talking about marrying me off, finding the guys, and they already had a list of men that they wanted to say, okay, you can choose between A and B, like this.
And you came to them and said, I have option C, which is a vegan, Zionist, atheist Jew.
No,
I don't think you did that, but it would have been very funny had you come as like, no, like I got the perfect man.
That's what I told David. I was like, you know what? And at that time, I was still believing, but I started to become less of a conservative Muslim. So I was like, yeah, you know what? Hey, that's not important. You know what? Why should my brother tell me how to dress? I'm not doing anything wrong, and why is it a sin? What am I doing wrong? And I started to really, after having these questions and really like examination of myself, I was like, yeah, he's right in a way. Look, I try to bury this. I always had doubts as a child. I was curious, and I had buried that growing up. I had suppressed my own personality and my sexuality too. And I told David that, hey, you know what? Maybe I tell my parents. Maybe they will accept you if you convert to Islam.
You said that seriously?
I said this seriously.
Oh,
and yeah, and he was like, okay. He said, okay, he will.
He said, did he say that seriously?
No, I didn't think, he told me that he didn't really mean it in that sense from his heart, of course, but he didn't want to disappoint me,
Okay.
He didn't want to upset me when I say no, and then I'm going to be like to him, look, still I'm marrying outside my culture and whatever. The least you can do for me is convert to Islam, This is what I was telling him. Because I was like, there's no way my parents will accept an atheist, And then, slowly it dawned on me, because there were more talks of marriage and everything. And my parents were like, yeah, this guy, he's the right one for you. You're going to get married to him. Basically, my parents wanted to force marry me. And literally, my heart was beating. And I was like, and I knew I loved somebody. And I knew, oh my God, what do I do? I was facing with this dilemma, and I had to act normal at home. When you're in love, when you're you might make mistakes, you might show this side, maybe there is somebody, and then you're locked. I knew that if it can turn out to be very bad for me, that my parents lock me and they send me to Pakistan or Afghanistan. They wanted me to marry somebody that they wanted to, religious, an Afghan and a Pashtun. That's the tribe I come from. Pashtun is an ethnic group basically in Afghanistan, and they even made fun of people who married outside of the ethnicity. So can you imagine? And I was like, oh my God, I think it's going to be a very bad idea telling my parents, because look, I'm alone against basically my parents, my three brothers, and three brothers. What if the moment I say this, they beat me up? Because they had beaten me up. I didn't tell you this, but growing up, I was punished with a cane, with a belt, with wires. Because my parents said I wasn't being good or misbehaved or whatever, so they would really punish me by slapping me. And I also grew up with this, and so you accept it, and you don't want to be hit, you don't want to be punished, so you accept, you try to act good not to be hit. So this is what I had to do as well as a child and as a teenager. And I was like, you know what? If I tell them this now, what if they lock me up and they slap me, they beat me? What if they even kill me? Because growing up, my parents would tell stories of what happened to women who dishonor the family. And there was a woman in our family, well, some distant relative or so. I was told something along those lines. And she had married within the culture and everything, but outside of marriage. And she was pregnant too, and they killed her.
Do you sincerely think that your parents could have been capable of killing you
I think that
for what you were doing?
Yes, I think so. I genuinely think, because imagine if I'm alone there with two adults and two grown-up you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Men, my brothers, and I'm just the only one, you know? I would be punished severely, maybe even raped, who knows? Um, and I think that I could have been killed, most likely, because then they would think that even if they would never believe that we had never met, they would say, but you slept with him, whatever, you dishonored us, we will kill you, you know?
And you had never met David at this time when you realized you were in love with him and you were almost getting forced married. You had never met
Yeah,
him.
we had never met, but we had written almost every day. And I had to make 4 different accounts because, back then, do you remember on Twitter, there was a limit on DMs? So,
I don't think I used Twitter back then because I had Twitter since maybe around the same time you did. I just didn't use it at all. I didn't start using Twitter until
okay.
like beginning of 2015 when I started doing all this atheism stuff. So I never engaged with anybody online. I think I just used it for news or something.
In the beginning, there was like a limit on DMs.
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't send too many DMs. I'm not sure if it was 200 or 300. So can you imagine? That was like 2 accounts full. So we had to use the third one in one day because we were just discussing everything,
Oh, so you wait. So
Uh,
you would send the limit DM limit in one account and then switch to the other account to keep going.
yeah.
Wow, it's kind of romantic. That's really
Because
sweet.
yeah, we were talking and we were like, oh my God, and I had to be extremely careful because I was like, shit, if I get caught. So I knew after talking with David too, that it's going to be a really bad idea for me. And he wasn't there to help me. There was nobody to help me. I'm alone with my parents, in the lion's den. I'm in the lion's den. And I was like, oh shit, there is no other way. And so we started talking and we were like, you know what, the only way out is by leaving and never returning, but not telling them. And the thing is, I had told my sister too. She didn't know that. She knew David and I were talking, but she didn't know we loved each other. She knew him too, by the way. But she didn't suspect anything. Because I knew that if me and my sister have a fight, she will rat me out. She will stab me in the back. Even though she once told me that, look, if one day you're gonna leave, because we always talked about this. The older we got, we were like, we will be married against our will, and we even watched a documentary about forced marriages once together. There was a BBC, I don't know, Channel 4 or BBC. There was a documentary. We had seen it, and at nighttime, I would discuss with my sister, saying, you know what, look at the situation. We're living like slaves here. And we would have these talks, and I was like, you know what, one day we will leave this place. And my sister was like, you know what, if you ever do, don't tell me and just go. This is what my sister told me. And I said, okay, if that's what you say, I will do it this way. So I didn't tell her. So I devised a plan with David and to leave. And I bought a ticket to France, and that's how we met. So on that day that I left, the thing is, it's quite a long story, basically, how I left, because it was a disaster in a way, because I didn't have enough money on my account because my parents would not give me money. They would only give me like I was only allowed to have 100 euros, pounds on my account for the month, but not more. Because they said that we don't know what you're going to do. So they took all of my, the grant that I got from university. They took the money for their own expenses. Yeah, they took the money. And so that was more than like 6,000 euros they took from me. And I even had a discussion back then. I remember I was like, that's my money. And you know what? My brother was like, no, that's not your money. Look, now she's talking about saying this is her money. Next day she will be doing something else. So I knew, okay, I better shut my mouth. Because this could turn really bad. What if I have no bank account? No, nothing. And I had no contract, so I was only allowed to have a certain amount of money on my phone for phone calls. So I didn't have much money, so I asked a friend for help, for money, but I didn't tell her what I needed the money for. I just said, please help. I have a situation. We have a family situation. And she was Muslim, by the way, but she never knew. Imagine if she knew I was leaving. Yeah, I don't think she would have helped me. So I took the money, and on that day I had a university exam. So I left really early, took my passport, and just left, never to return again. So yeah, that's how I actually left London, and I came to France and met my partner. And from there, we went to Poland. And now we're living in Bratislava, but we were also in Israel. But yeah, it was a long journey for me. And even when I met him, I was still believing. I was still religious in a
You were
way.
still
But
believing when you met him.
yeah, because I was
Really?
like, that's the only thing I knew. Because when I met him, I questioned everything, of course, but I became more of a secular Muslim.
Okay.
Like, Majid Nawaz. Do you know Majid Nawaz?
Yes.
So sort of like Majid Nawaz.
Okay.
So when I met him, but I was like, when I had left for France, I had taken off my hijab. I actually threw it away because I was like, no.
What was the feeling like when you left and you got to France and you escaped from your family? Permanently. What was going through your mind? Was it fear?
Wow,
Was it you were elated? You were happy? What was that?
it was sort of like, when you're being hunted. You're being hunted, so you cannot be happy in the moment. You cannot be truly happy, because in that moment you cannot be, because you're not in safety yet. So you are very much aware. It's sort of like, let's say a man is chasing you with a knife. It's sort of like that feeling, adrenaline. My body was filled with adrenaline, and I was just, the moment I had left the house, everybody was sleeping, by the way. Everybody, I knew they would think I had gone to university, because I told them I have an exam early in the morning. So when they wake up around 8 o'clock, I would have been gone. So it looked normal, When they wake up, my parents wouldn't, my brothers and my mother, because my dad was not there, they wouldn't think, where is she? They would think, okay, she's in university because she told us she has an exam, And I had taken my passport I actually stole my passport, because the day before, it was actually short. My plan was cut short. I was meant to leave later, but I had to leave earlier. This is why I needed the money, because my parents needed my passport and everybody's passport because of some tax thing, the authorities. And I was like, oh shit, my passport is gone. What do I do, So I actually had to steal it early in the morning from my brother's desk, and he was sleeping there, and I was tiptoeing, getting it from the plastic wallet on his computer desk. And I see he's turning around, but his eyes are closed. And I take my passport out and I leave. And I'm pretty calm, actually. I'm really calm in this moment, because I knew that I cannot panic. If I panic, I have lost. So, and not to turn around. That's the thing. The moment you leave, never look back. The moment you look back, you have the feeling something is drawing you back. It's like a black hole,
And if you had messed up in that moment, had he woken up, you probably never would have gotten your passport.
I had a story. I had a backup story. My backup story was this. I had hid my ID, university ID, in my bra. And if he had asked me why I'm coming here, I'm going to say, look, I didn't want to wake you up, and I need my passport because I cannot do the exam without an ID. And I lost my bloody lanyard,
Mm-hmm.
my university on the train somewhere, and I need the passport. I would have told this story. And I knew it was believable, because, you cannot enter. I knew, you cannot do an exam without an ID. And if you lose your ID, you have to. And I'm going to be like, okay, you can come with me if you want. I would have told him this. I would have said, okay, let's go together then, if you don't believe me.
Oh, so you had it all planned, even in that case.
In that very moment, I thought about this. In that split second that I thought about this, because I was like, when things go wrong, you never know, because all odds are against me. So you have to think about the worst case scenario, yeah? And I took it, and I just and I didn't, because there were two doors. So I basically I left the first door open because it made a lot of sound, a lot of noise. I was like, oh shit, So I left the first door open, and the last door, the one facing the road, I closed. And I was like, oh shit, now I better leave. And I just kept walking. I walked first, right? Halfway through the road, I'm walking, and then I run.
Right. So in case they came down and saw you, and if they saw you running, they thought you were escaping. If you're just walking, you could say, "Well, I'm just going to school" or something.
Yeah, so
Right.
halfway, as, that they couldn't see me, I was walking, and then as soon as I was out of sight of the house, I was running. I quickly went. I went to university. I took the money and I left. And I went to took the train and just I was gone like this. Um, and everybody had seen me at university on that day because I was like, they looked at me and nobody asked me. That's the funny thing. Why is my hair looking disheveled? Because I was wearing the hijab very loosely, and I was not wearing any socks. And I was pretty calm. There was an
Right.
exam and everybody's stressing out, and I'm sitting there not even giving a damn. And the only thing I'm worried about is the £100 that I need. And luckily I had that money. And I was left and I was like, yeah. They were like, aren't you going to go do the exam? Look, we're starting in like 10 minutes. And I was like, look, I'm prepared for the exam. I was like this. I've revised and I know I will ace it. You go, I'll be there. This is what I said. I know. I don't know where I got the balls to say this, but you have this courage you never know that you have. And I had that courage and I knew I had to stay calm. So I just left and never to return again. That's how, for me, it was really an escape because I knew there was no other way that I would leave my life. Because around this time, when I was thinking about leaving, I knew that look, I could finally do whatever I want. I don't have to be judged every single moment. I'm not forced to. Okay, I believed in that moment, but it wasn't sort of like you have to pray now. Wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, forcing me to pray.
What,
And it was sort of like.
what were you at all nervous that you were putting your life in the hands of a person you had never met and is only a Twitter account? And what if he's not what he says he is? What if he doesn't show up? Did that occur to you?
The thing is that didn't occur to me. That's the thing. For me, it was like, when you write to somebody for so long, months on end, every single day, hours long, how can they keep up the facade?
Maybe you just never
If
been
they're saying,
catfished.
yeah, maybe that. But for me, it was like he's such an intelligent human being, so well educated. I never thought of this actually, and we had even phoned as well. We even talked on the phone. We had seen each other's pictures, by the way.
Oh, okay.
I exchanged a selfie with my hijab. He still has that selfie of the hijab, by the way. I had exchanged that, and when Twitter was not available because all accounts were juiced out, I would go to email. So we would continue on email. So it was sort of like, back in the days, when you write love letters. And I never thought of this because for me, it was like, it cannot be worse than the situation I'm in. It cannot be worse than my family who are forcing me, who are beating me to do this, who are telling me what to eat, what to do with my life. They will marry me off to a man who will basically have sex with me when he wants. He will rape me and force me to stay at home. It cannot be worse than that. And of course, it's uncertain. I knew I was stepping into uncertainty, but I didn't question his honesty. And when I went to France, I was in a casino waiting for him. Casino, can you believe it? I was never in a casino in my entire life. And that was the first time. The first act of my freedom was taking off my hijab, and the next one was in a casino. And I'm waiting, and I was thinking, and this guy told me, have you met this guy? I told him a little bit. And I was like, what if he's exactly what you asked? And he said, what about this? And I was like, no, I don't think so. Why would he do this to me? And even if he did, you know what? If I go back, I would never go. If I go back to the UK, it won't be to my parents' place. I knew that I had 2 or 3 friends who I knew, who didn't have any contact with my family or anything, but I knew they would help me. They were secular and very kind people. And I was like, okay, maybe they can help me. So I knew there was somebody to help me if I needed help, but I would never go back to my parents' house. That's one thing I decided on. And I was like, you know what? No way am I going back to that cage. And whatever comes at me. I will deal with it. This is the attitude I had. I was like, I'm not going to be too worried now thinking about this and that. He's saying he's coming, so I'm waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever happens, happens. I'm not going to stress myself out, because I was already under stress. And then he was there, exactly like he said he would be. So I knew, okay, basically, I know some people have been catfished, but the intensity of our friendship, we are like best friends. The intensity of that, the talking, the never ending, the understanding and everything. A person who's like that cannot fool you, I think you cannot hide it. There comes a moment. Can you imagine having to catfish somebody out, not 24 hours 7? Sooner or later, you will reveal your true colors, or on the way you're going to say, haha, it was a game. No, I really heard he was coming, he had called me from different countries and I knew, okay, he's coming. It's true, I'm going to believe in this. I said, there has to be hope in this world.
I'm just shocked that your whole escape and this opening up of the world and that you found love and now you're married all because of Twitter, because Twitter to me has made me hate the world.
No, for me, it was really the other way around. For me, it was really like Twitter. If it wasn't for Twitter, if it wasn't for, I think it was, there was the VMA Awards. And basically I wanted to know live what was going on. And I had heard of Twitter before. And I was like, oh my God, on Twitter, I can know what's going on in real time, So that's why I joined Twitter. That's why I joined Twitter, because of the VMAs.
Thank Allah for the VMAs.
I know, right?
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, and it was like, oh my God. And I became really addicted to it because I was like, oh my God, for the first time in my life, I'm in the platform where ideas are changed, where I exchanged, where you meet so many different people that you never have the opportunity of meeting before, Because in Afghanistan, there was no TV, there was no computer, there was no nothing, So I also had that in my back as well. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. This is, there will be so much peace in the world because of Twitter,
Yeah, so much peace in the world because of Twitter. Yeah, I don't know if that's true anymore. But I can still see that today, even though I think in the West we talk so much about the bullying and the aggressiveness on Twitter, I think there's still so many people in the world that are in the situation that you were, and their really only outlet is through something like Twitter. And even if it's to see really aggressive kind of conversation, maybe that's better than nothing, right?
That's exactly it. Even if you're saying the most hateful stuff, but you should have that right to say it, and I should have that right to argue back. So it should be in that manner, exchange of ideas, even if it's heated. I mean, I have a friend, he's quite religious, actually. Mm-hmm. He's Orthodox Jew, and we always have these really tough discussions, really like sometimes even verbal, yeah. But then we are still friends, because it's nice to have that difference of opinion, that difference of a different outlook on life, because it will be so boring if you surround yourself with people who have the same opinion as you. And that's, for me, it was like, wow, and so for me, it really helped to bring everything together. And it was sort of like letting out the steam. Chora was that sort of, I mean, I do remember sometimes being really nasty, not bullying, but nasty in the discussions, sort of being apologetic and sort of like, Linda Sarsour, I think you've heard of her.
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah. I was something like this. I was like this, but somehow I wasn't exactly like her. I was more curious than others. I was interested in science. I was interacting with atheists, even if I didn't believe in them. Or it didn't understand their perspective, but I was trying to still communicate, because I was like, look, if Islam claims to be the truth, then why should I be afraid of his opinion,
could you imagine if Linda Sarsour became an atheist and married some vegan Zionist Jew? That would be interesting. I don't think that's going to happen to her.
I don't think so, because she's really radical. For me, I always had this curious side. And for me, I always had this, treat people how you want to be treated. Like, this has nothing to do with religion. I always believed in this as a child as well. Treat people with kindness, with decency, and you don't need religion for that. And but those people who don't believe in these values, they can never turn back. They can never go the right path because they will always be radicals. There will always be these rabid dogs, let's say. I mean, I'm sorry, but dogs are cute, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. So yeah, so when I met him, I was secular, and after I had deleted that Twitter and I had made a new Twitter. I closed the one that my parents knew of then, and I made a new one. And on this new platform, I could really be okay. I used a different name, like a sort of anonymous name, and I could really be like discuss ideas freely without the restrictions of that were placed on me. So I could be whoever I wanted to be. But the thing is, um, it is easy to achieve freedom on one side. The hardest part is after freedom. Really, I have to say this. It was easy for me to leave that day on that and have the balls to leave. The hardest part for me was after. What do you do with freedom now that you have it? You're in the dark. You have to, everything you have been told was bullshit, or maybe not, but you have the chance to finally analyze every aspect of your life. You have nothing to worry about. No study, nobody's there. No child to take care of, nothing. You have just yourself.
Do you find that freedom it seems romanticized maybe from the point of view you were in your family, but then when you have it creates a lot of introspection, and suddenly you have also responsibility and hard work and things you didn't really think about besides just the freedom to do what you want. Is that
That's it.
Yeah.
Freedom. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's how it was for me, because I'm like, okay, I'm free. What do I do now? It was like it was being born again. Like when I went from Afghanistan to England, I had no I didn't know how to read, write, so I had to start everything from the beginning. And I had to go through the same thing now. I was in a new country, in a new environment. Yes, I am with somebody who loves and respects and cares for me. We would have really discussions about religion, about philosophy and politics. But it wasn't like, oh, you have to believe this. Really, it was like, okay, tell me why. Give me an explanation. And I had no explanation. That's the thing. I was like, okay, this is just because that's the word of God. This is what I said. Because it's so beautiful, it must be true. This is what I said about the Quran.
So when did you become an atheist? How much after that did you become an atheist, I should ask?
A year later, actually. So
wait, what year did you leave home?
I left in 2013. Actually, it's almost now a month that I've left. Almost a month from now was the anniversary of my freedom. So in June I left, 20th of June 2013. I remember it so clearly as daylight. So yeah, I left at that time, and my parents did threaten me. My parents did send me emails saying, you bitch, you whore, blah, blah, blah. You've been brainwashed by a Jew. He bewitched you. All these things. Come back. We forgive you. You have to apologize back to us. This is what they told me. And I was like, what the fuck? Yeah, no way. And I was like, fuck off,
Through what medium did they find you?
Oh, through email, because I still had my old email.
I see. Okay.
The one they knew. That's how they contacted me. And I was in contact with my sisters, and my sisters had my phone number. And my sisters didn't tell my parents, I think, at that time. I'm not sure, actually, if they did. But somehow I felt like they were trying to stab me in the back, because they were telling me they were also getting abused at home, being forced to pray, all these things. And I was like, you know what? You guys are under 18. You need to really call the police and write to the forced marriage line, because now there is a special sector in the UK dedicated to forced marriages. And I knew that my sisters could get forced married. So, two, I escaped it, but they are left behind, So I wanted to help them. So I tried helping them, but then they, they contacted the authorities, etc., and they were taken out and given to foster care. But a day later, they returned. Can you believe it? They returned.
They wanted to return, or they were returned by the police to your parents?
No. They actually wanted to return. they were given to foster care because I even talked to them. I was like, you know what? Here, my sister wrote this email. So my sisters did all the contacting and everything. They contacted the authorities, and suddenly the police is at home and the girls are taken away to foster care because of abuse, child abuse, because they were underage. And they were being hit, and they were being hit and beaten as well. Because I have ashamed the family. Now the other two girls, what if they have done something? So they were punishing them as well. So the police came and took them and gave them to foster care. And like a day or so later, they returned back saying they wanted to return and that they apologized. It's not true that I actually forced them to tell this story. This is what they try to blame it on me, even though they're the ones who contacted the authorities. And I had all the DMs, all the emails of them begging for help. And I think it was to lure me in and stab me in the back. And they even gave my phone number, and my parents called me, and I was like, what the fuck? How could you betray me? How could you do this? I even told my sisters, look, I tried to help you guys. You could have had a new beginning like me, and it's beautiful. I tell you this, it is hard, of course. You guys are going to be alone with a foster care, but those parents are going to care for you. They're going to love you. And look, they accepted you. They don't even know you, and they accepted you in their house. And the family was black, and Afghan and Muslim communities, those who are not black, they have this racism. There is racism in non-black Muslim communities against blacks. And because the family was black, my sister was like, "Oh, but they're blacks," and I was like, "Who gives a fuck? They're the ones helping you. So what if they're black? Why are you talking like this? You grew up in this country, and you're talking like my parents." I told them, And she was like almost 18 years old, by the way. So she's not a 7-year-old kid. She was around almost 18, like a month before her birthday. And I was like, look, you know what's right and wrong. You talk about the injustices going on, and now you're blaming it on me and on this poor family that's trying to help you. And yeah, they try to literally sell me out. And I was like, you know what? Fuck you. Now you will never hear from me. And my parents disowned me too in this time. And therefore, I have no contact with them.
So after you left, you never saw any of your family again?
No, I didn't see them. And I'm glad I didn't, because in the beginning for me, it was like sad. But then I was like, you know what? They wanted to marry me off against my will to a man who would rape me whenever he wants, to have children, to stay at home, be a baby machine. Because I had seen this with my mother, I don't think she had sex whenever she wanted. She even once told me, because I asked her, is there such thing as rape in Islam? Because no, I asked her, what about rape in Islam? And she said there is no such thing in our community, in a marriage. So if somebody else does it, okay, but in a marriage, when the husband does it, it's legitimate. Because you should satisfy your husband's needs. Otherwise, you're not a good Muslim. This is what my mother told me, coming from a woman, she's justifying her own slavery and rape, basically. And I was like, literally, I was like, wow, I don't want that future for me, like my mother, because she also suffered from depression, I'm sure. Being so unhappy with her life, being with a man. Okay, she also taught bad values to her sons by telling them that they are so great and everything just because they have dicks. But she accepted it in the end. She cared about what people thought about her, what the neighbors thought about her, and I was like, no, I don't want that. I don't want to be in this community. I don't want to be surrounded by this toxic environment where I have to fear for my life, that I'm afraid of my husband coming home because he will rape me now. And that's, I was really thinking about this, because I knew of cousins, I knew of relatives who had gone through this, who were hit and beaten, and it was acceptable. Because it was blamed on the woman. She must have done something to provoke him. This is what they said. My brother slapped me. He's younger than me. I just want to quickly add this. And I will never forget this. He was he wanted to play games on the computer, but I needed the computer for schoolwork. And I was like, look, you play too many games. No, you're not going to get it. And he's like, no, get up, like trying to be he was very aggressive, and he was like 4 years younger than me. So he was like 14, 15 or so. And I can't remember now, but he was in school, secondary school, sorry. And I was like, look, so what are you going to do if I don't get up? Are you going to hit me? I was like, is this what you call manhood? I told him this in his face. And you know what? He hit me. And my mother came in the room and she said, good that you hit her. That's the place of a woman. This is what she said. And I never forgot that. And I was like, no, that's not the future I want for my life. And why should I care about what people think? You know, why should I be afraid? My body doesn't, my life doesn't belong to them. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just think it's very important. Besides your story is the characteristics you're saying right now about your mother, because it's counterintuitive to a lot of people. I think like myself, because I wouldn't know this unless I spoke with people like you, that like a woman in a system like Islam, especially this fundamentalist, very conservative, very patriarchal, very misogynistic community and family structure of Islam, that she could embrace it and even defend it and fight for it and believe in it so dearly. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. Even people who follow the Islam discussion may think that all women in Islam are always fighting against it, because how could you believe in it? Why would you defend it if you're a second-class citizen and you're literally being raped in a marriage? Because wouldn't every woman want to get out and fight against it? And not necessarily. I think there's women like you in communities like that, but then there's also women like your mother, and not just in Islam. I see this across the board in all kinds of deeply religious communities. I do always hear from the women I interview, like yourself, like their mothers were the most religious and the most that kept them down from studying, from working. Things like that. I don't know, the dynamic between your mother and your father, who was the more fundamentalist and who kept you down the most. But
I think my mother more.
Your mother more.
I think so. Wow. I would say so too, because my father was rarely at home. And in Afghanistan, later on, my father, I told you, he had left before us, and that's how we were able to leave the country. The thing is, I was more with my mother than my father. So I didn't have that sort of connection with him. So there was like, my father was not there that often, and he would be going out and stuff like that. And he wasn't that interactive with us either, but the mother was always there, and she would literally, I keep on saying literally and basically, she would tell the boys that it's their right, that they should be macho, that they should be, they're better than us, because we women, like a woman cannot lead a prayer. She shouldn't lead a prayer in Islam. She cannot be an imam. Sorry, she cannot be an imam because we are basically too stupid. And she accepted this. When you are, it is for us, of course, it is for me, it's hard to understand that, but I can explain it, but I cannot understand it. I can explain why it's like this. It's this, when you're a prisoner, why do you think some people go back to prison? And, there are a lot of people who commit crimes to go back to prison.
Right. There are people who are institutionalized, that they miss prison, and because that's a structure they start to, that they can only understand and work in.
Yeah. And, the other thing is that, my mother grew up in a very secular environment. My father was more in a religious, although communist, family-wise, yeah. My grandfather, my mother's side, I have to say this was good. There are good aspects too. But the bad outweighs by far the good. My grandfather, for example, he had no education. He had his own business in Jalalabad. That's another city in Afghanistan. And he had his own transport business. He didn't know how to read and write, but he made sure all the daughters went to school. Even back then, even during the communist time, when there was no a prohibition of women's education, but still in rural parts, there was, the families wouldn't allow the daughters to go to school, or you would only go to class 1, but not more than that. But my grandfather ensured that all the women had that access to education and also to jobs. So my mother grew up in a very, very liberal family, liberal for Afghanistan, let's say. Still traditional, but liberal. So she didn't wear the hijab and this. And, so can you imagine, the more religious Afghanistan became, my mother had to also adapt. She could no longer be the princess because she was the youngest, she could no longer do this and that. And she also lost family members during the Soviet war, Afghan-Soviet war in Afghanistan. She lost her father, and that mental toll it takes on you as a child. I think that too, but also because she wasn't that religious growing up, and then she became religious. So it's it's the other way around. Like for me, I was non-religious, and then I became religious, and then not religious. For my mother, it was not being religious for a long time and then suddenly being religious. It's like, some Muslims who drink alcohol and dance, and suddenly they discover the true meaning of Islam. And then you see them wearing hijab the next day, and they're like, oh, I don't drink alcohol anymore. It's sort of like that. Because maybe she felt guilty, and also because she always cared about what people, let's not care, but I think, yeah, she cares. She's still around. She cares about what people think, because she still grew up in this traditional society. Let's take the religion aspect out. But in a way, you cannot. It's very much goes hand in hand, but still, they care about what the community says. And that was her weakness as well. She didn't want to be seen as whatever, she wanted to be known as, look at her as an example, shining example of a Muslim woman. This was her ideal. And she even said she wants to go to Saudi Arabia once. After she came from Hajj, she was like, my dream is to go to Saudi Arabia with all of you. Some of you can stay behind and study here when my brother gets married, and the rest of us can go to Saudi Arabia, because she wants to be in the land of Prophet, under quote marks, Muhammad's, his birthplace. And she wants to do a service, even if she has to clean the Kaaba, That was her dream, I was like, what the hell, I was like, why did you learn English properly? I was like, why don't you join an English course and finally work on your language skills? Why don't you learn how to drive and do these things? Even if I was a Muslim at that time as a child, I would tell my mother, look, let me help you read. I would try to help her in the evening with reading. But she was just lazy in her thinking. She had given up, I think, a long time ago. Imagine being raped in your marriage and having 6 children, 6 fucking children, and losing, others. What is it called? What is it called when you lose a child? I forgot.
You mean in at birth?
Pregnancy? No, in pregnancy.
In pregnancy, miscarriage.
Miscarriage. Sorry. Mm-hmm. All these things, like in Western European society, a woman, let's say atheist, secular, she has to go through this. She will have a lot of emotional things to deal with. So imagine you add religion to it and the traditions to it. It's so much more to, let's say, work on. But she really started believing she started to believe this inferiority that she was told she's inferior to men, that she cannot think for herself, because women don't have that place. And for them, this is freedom. My mother was like, Islam liberated women. Look, my husband, I can have a divorce in marriage, and you can have a divorce when your husband tells you can have a divorce. That's the other side that they don't explain. You can have a divorce, but they don't tell you that the man is the one who can give you divorce and not you. Or a woman can act as a witness, but your testimony isn't worth much. They don't tell you that aspect. Or they say, but Khadija, who was the Muhammad's first wife, she was a businesswoman. But this has nothing to do with Islam, because That was pre-Islam. She was a businesswoman before, you know.
Yeah, but he
Um,
also married an older businesswoman when he had no options and he wasn't powerful and he
yeah,
wasn't the leader of a
he
clan,
needed
right?
money.
As soon as he
Yeah, he
had
needed the
power
money.
and he had the power
Yeah,
and he was a leader of a powerful clan and he was a warlord, then he started marrying lots of little girls, right? It was
that's
he didn't choose to, in the best situation to marry an older businesswoman. That's when he had no
yeah.
options.
And when I was like, but you know, I had genuine questions. Not that I was trying to make fun or whatever. When I was there, I was like, but what about Muhammad? You know, he married. Is it true that there is this verse about beating women, or that he married a 9-year-old? How old was she? You know, because I was disturbed. Even though I believed, I was disturbed. I was like, if this is the final prophet, this is the truth. How can you marry somebody who doesn't? I mean, I remember when I was 9. Um, that is so disturbing. And I said, but you know what? There is this verse, because you know, at that time, through my Twitter discussions, people were quoting to me this verse about Surah 4. You know, where when men are told to beat women.
Yeah.
Um, I think you know the verse. I cannot really know. I don't know if word for word now, but if
it
you search it,
it gives all the steps towards disciplining your wife. That first you stop talking to her, and then you don't sleep with her, and then if she keeps disobeying after certain things, then you're allowed to hit her. And I've heard actually Muslim women in videos even praise this as, oh, did you see that Allah gave us multiple steps to
yeah,
go through before being beaten? Isn't this so
it's
kind?
it's really crazy. And I asked my father. I was like, you know what? There is this verse, because I didn't tell him how I came across this. Of course, you know. I was like, you know, there is a verse, and I even checked it. 'Cause, you know, in the Quran that I have, the verse was there. I was like, this cannot be made up. You know, it's really there. I was shocked. That was one of the first shocks that I had. I was like, wow, I can't believe it. How can I defend this? You know, I was like this. I had this conflict, dilemma. And I asked my father, because he knows, he speaks Arabic fluently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was like, is this true? Can you tell me the translation of this? You know, because I was like, what if somebody made up an English translation? And it was exactly like this. It was true what I read, you know? The translation was accurate. And my father tried to explain it by getting a miswak. A miswak, I don't know if you know it. It's sort of like a wooden thing that you use for cleaning your teeth. And
Mm-hmm.
apparently, I think Muhammad used this or something back in his days to clean your teeth. A miswak is, I think, is the right word. And he got the miswak, and he was like, "Let me demonstrate." And he just tapped. He was like, "Yes," and I was like, "But beat. It says beat." He was like, "Okay, but I will show you. You can do this." And he taps his hand. He's demonstrating to me how to hit a woman. Can you believe it? I was like, "Okay." I didn't say anything in that moment. I was like, "Okay, okay," because what can I say? You know. I was disturbed.
Can I ask you about your mother? Could it be, and because I hearing this situation from so many women, could it be that because she's in this situation where she's having so many children, she's in a marriage where she doesn't have control of the home or sex. So you're a woman in a marriage where you have practically no power, and the only way you can have power, perhaps in your home or in the larger community, is being a pious Muslim. And being a pious Muslim means following things so literally and so in the way that keeps her down as a second class citizen. But at least she has that. At least she's, people can look at her and say she's a good Muslim woman. At least that's some
Yeah,
power.
that's what I said. Like, it was for me the same. You know, like when you're in such a situation, you have nothing else to fight for,
Right.
and you start believing the lies you are being told, and you start accepting it, and you even start fighting for these ideas that you would have found repulsive if you just had that, let's say, 5 minutes of freedom. You would, when you look at it from that perspective, 5 minutes of freedom, nobody telling you anything, you would be repulsed and disgusted by this. And yeah, it was for me the same. So in a way, I understand. I can explain it, but when I look at it from today's perspective, I'm like, wow, I can't believe that this is like like it's madness. That's one. Insanity is the word I would say it is. because she always wondered, oh, what would the people say? She even said, we didn't come to the UK because we want you to do whatever you want in your life. You're coming here. We gave you this right. This is what she told me. We gave you this right, so you should be grateful for it. And do not shame our family name. And we didn't come here for people to speak bad about us. So it was like this, because you know what? A lot of people are leaving places like Afghanistan, Iraq for Europe. Why? Because they have all the liberties that they don't have in Muslim countries, but yet they can still continue living like they do at home. You know, they have no wars, nothing to worry about that. They make money. They can have fun, the men, I mean, and the women stay at home and cook for them. Like for men, it's comfortable.
Right. So they have all the freedoms of secularism, but all the fundamentalism of Islam at home.
That's exactly it. They are like, I would say, they act like, how should I put this? They act like peaceful people outside. No, I'm not saying all Muslims are like this, but there is this problem that exists in a lot of these communities. And it comes back to religion. Like, even whether you're from Afghanistan, people will blame it on culture, but whether you're from Afghanistan or from Algeria or Indonesia, whatever, why does it always have to end up with these problems? Forced marriages, FGM, discriminating, beating up people who apostates or gays. These problems, intolerance exists in Islam, but they don't want to address this because people are afraid of being labeled as a racist.
So when you left, suddenly you have all this freedom. What were the difficulties you found? Like, was it hard to dress without? I mean, did you still use hijab when you had left?
No, I didn't wear the hijab after that. I mean, I wear the hijab now, by the way, but only for my porn videos.
we haven't even. Somebody might have been listening to this whole thing and not know you do that. Yeah, bomb drop. That's what you do.
I know.
But I kind of want to get there slowly, because I saw you evolve to that, and I didn't know, for example, that, because I know I started doing everything I do online in January 2015, beginning of 2015. So it was less than 2 years that you had escaped from your home when I first kind of encountered you from the beginning.
Yeah, actually, I think it was like, less than 1.5 years, actually. Less than 1.5 years that I had left. So when I had left, you asked me, how did I cope with this? How did I face all these problems now that I was faced with it? Like, my parents are no longer there. I'm free. And I have no structure. There is no university. There is no job, no nothing. Because, David was working, and I was like, okay. And he said, you know what? Take as much time as you need, he said. There's no stress, no nothing. Look, I don't want you to feel like this is from one, that you escaped. Yeah, that you escaped from one prison to the next. This is not, a prison, you do what you want. That's your life now, he said. And I'm very lucky, of course, to have met somebody like David, because so many people won't be like this. They would take advantage of you, but he never took advantage of me. So I was, I had the whole day for myself. I was doing nothing, I was like, wow. The first thing I was thinking is, what do I do? And I wrote to him. I told him, hey, what do I do? I don't know what to do. And he said, you know what? It's your life. Do whatever you want. Don't ask me. And I was upset. I was like, what? I felt offended, that he would tell me to do whatever I want in my life, to plan my day however I see fit, and not to message him with this when he was at work, because I would keep on messaging him, because imagine not knowing anybody, and that's the only contact you have.
You were offended that a man would not tell you what to do with your life.
Yeah,
I mean, this is like reverse feminism.
I know, because I didn't see it in that moment, because I was used to doing things for other people. I was used to people telling me what to do. I never thought for myself. I never chose something for me. Even when I went shopping, I never said, I want to buy this for me. I want to look beautiful for myself. I never had this.
So it was hard to make a decision on your own because you hadn't done it before.
Yeah, so I had made the first decision of freedom. And the second decision was now, oh my God, what do I do with my freedom? And it was hard. And I started slowly. It was really, and it was hard for me because I was, you know, sitting outside in the garden. I would play with the cats and cats. My day was like this. I wake up like whenever I wanted, I never had this. I had to wake up really early, prepare food before for my brothers, sisters, pray, and all these things. And now I could wake up when I want, eat when I want, do what I want. And I would play with our cats for hours. I was like, wow, this is nice. And then I was like, what do I do next? So I started to slowly structure my day. I started to read more. I read Majid Nawaz's work, Sam Harris, Hitchens, because I was like, you know what am I afraid of? I still believed, but I was like not satisfied. I was hungry for more. I was like, you know what? Why am I believing all these things? People have told me to believe these things. I really need to start changing my outlook, examine why I believe in these traditions, in these religious beliefs. I was trying to figure out more about myself. So I started reading more, Nietzsche, Kafka, because I could finally read those books. Because I remember also growing up, I wasn't allowed to read those authors. So I wasn't allowed to read anything that had anything to do with secularism, atheism, because those were the books of the devil, as they were called, at home. So I was only allowed to read books that I needed for school. That's it. Or Islamic books, but nothing more than that. So I could finally read more. And I started doing this. And slowly, I started questioning the beliefs that I held. And really tackling at it one by one, and also having discussions on it. And I started having these discussions on my other Twitter account that I had made at that time in 2014. Beginning of 2014, I still believed, but then slowly I was like, you know what? This is bullshit, because I started to read the Quran, but with this open-mindedness. I looked at the Hadith, and I was like, wow, this is mental. This is crazy. I can't believe that I really believed in this nonsense. This guy is a warlord. He married a 9-year-old. In no world, in no century is this okay. When you claim to have the truth, when you claim to be the perfect man, this cannot be right. And I cannot continue living a lie. And then I became agnostic. And then I became like an agnostic atheist. So yeah, it took a long time, actually. I was very hungry for knowledge, and I came across Majid Nawaz and Sam Harris also, and I would watch I read their works, but also watch their talks that they gave. Also, Yasmeena Ali, and I was like, wow, these people, they're doing so much more for change than people like my parents. They're doing so much more to help people. This is crazy. And also, I read Salman Rushdie's book, Satanic Verses. This was something that was forbidden. And I was like, what is there to be afraid of? I'm not afraid. I welcome uncertainty.
I heard it's very difficult to read that book.
It is difficult. But for me, it was even more difficult. But because I had I was trying to cling on to beliefs. But when I read it, and also along with the Quran with an open mind, I was like, you know what? Great, well done, Rushdie. Well done that you wrote this book. And look at these assholes who protested against him, issued a fatwa. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, you may have seen what I do now. It's like I get the same. I don't get any fatwas or any death fatwas or anything like that. But the hate that you get, just for criticizing an idea, and they're so afraid of this criticism. My parents too, and for me, I enjoy it. I really enjoy to dissect these beliefs, these traditions, for me, it's a lot of fun, actually, with the work that I'm doing too, it's really fun. So yeah, I started slowly doing that. And when we met, at that time, I started doing webcam modeling afterwards because I was curious. David, he does nude he's not a model, but he does photography. He's a photographer, professional photographer, and he did nude photography, erotic photography, and he would show me the photos. So for me, the next big change, aside from the change of to my thoughts, the next change was my physical and mental and sexual well-being, because I still suppressed my sexuality. Maybe as a child I had an orgasm. Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe because there was an image I have in mind that I remember maybe when I was 10 or something, and maybe I stopped because I felt ashamed, thinking, oh, I'm doing something wrong, because you're told to be good, to be pious, and not to do anything. And between that time, when I was probably like 10 or something, and until I was 20, I didn't have any sexual experience. I never kissed a guy. I never went out on a date, or you know what I mean? I never had that sort of, even though I was in love, but that's still different in a way, because I had that experience I did not have in our relationship in the beginning. And I didn't, we had this sort of like, whenever I feel comfortable, first of all, I need to concentrate on myself. Started concentrating on myself, and I started to discover pleasure. And I remember when I was having an orgasm at the age of like 20, I was like, oh my God, it's taking so long. What is this? What am I doing wrong? It's rocket science. This is what I was thinking. And because of the guilt, also because of religion, the guilt that is instilled in you that you shouldn't have pleasure, you shouldn't have fun in your life, that masturbating or having sex aside of marriage, anyone you're not married with, is a sin. That was still in my head, so I was like, hey, fuck it, you know what, I need to really change this as well, because I'm not happy. I'm definitely not happy with this. I'm stopping myself. And in the beginning, I also wore very conservative clothes. When I would go out, I would wear like trousers and tops, but I would button up really, like thinking everybody's looking at me. Oh my God, people are looking at me. And I was like, why do I care about what people think? So it was always this fight, that primitive side of your mind saying people are looking at me, and the more intelligent side is fighting against that primitive side saying, fuck you, So it was this battle that I had, mental battle. And I started webcamming just out of curiosity, actually, because I was like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to see what it's like. It's anonymous. Nobody knows anything. Nobody knows who I am. There's nothing. I just to see. And I really enjoyed it. I was like, wow. And also through webcamming, I became more sexually open. What
would a webcamming involve?
A webcamming. Okay. So for me, when I started, it was only like, I didn't do any private shows. I will explain what that means. So there was a public chat room. So it's a chat room, and you sit there, and there's music playing, and you just talk to people. You talk about your experiences, and then they tell you, yeah, you know what do you think about this? Or have you heard of this? And I was like, wow, I didn't even know that feet could be a fetish. I didn't know this before. I was like, wow, that's really a fetish. I can't believe this. So for me, I didn't know this. I wouldn't have known all these things if it wasn't for that. And in the beginning, for weeks on end, I would just sit there. I'm saying, no, I'm not doing it right now. Saying I will only do a little bit of dancing. That was my thing, just dancing and a little bit of like strip and tease, but not more than that. And then the more I did it, the more confident I became. And I was like, you know what? I don't give a fuck. I'm going to do what I want, why should I care about what people think? And this is my body. And I'm not killing anybody. I'm not harming anybody. I'm just having fun. And I was also making money. I was like, wow, I'm making money and by having fun. What a nice job, right?
Did you talk to David about this? About what you were doing?
Yeah, I told him. I was like, what do you think about this? He was like, whatever makes you happy. He was like, if that's what you want, do it,
So he really had no
don't ask.
constraints on you at all.
No, he was like, don't ask me. It's your body. Like, this has nothing to do with me. And I have to say, that's very rare to come. Such men or women are very rare to come across that. You are just free in your thoughts, and we are still together, and we still have this trust. We still love each other, but we can have fun with other people. That's it's just sex is just a leisure. It's an activity, social activity. I think we try to put too much emphasis on it, too much sort of like holy, it's sacred. It's nothing like that. It's like, when I go to the hair salon or when I have my nails done, it's part of we are very social beings, creatures. When you look at the bonobos, they have fun, and why shouldn't we have fun, and I told him, and he was like, whatever makes you happy, do it if that's what you want. But don't ask me about such matters, not about what I think or if I'm going to be jealous. You know what? I don't care. He said, I don't care about that. I'm with you, and I don't care about what people say as well. So I was like, okay. So I had that support, which maybe many don't have. I'm very happy. I'm very lucky that I have this support. And the more I did this, the more I became free. And I think it was around this time that we met, actually.
Yeah, I only knew you as somebody said you were, I think, an ex-Muslim, and then, as soon as I think I saw you online, you were uploading kind of erotic pictures of yourself. So
yeah,
I think to me, you were just kind of an enigma. I didn't really I didn't know all this background behind you to understand what you were doing online, because I think because online also was very new to me. When I first met you, I was learning how to use Twitter, because I'm a bit older than you. And I don't even know what webcamming is really, because to me, when I discovered pornography when I was young and a teenager, I was discovering Playboy magazines. So
webcamming is like, when you have, what sexting is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's basically like that, but it's visual.
Which is super awkward.
It's awkward. No, it's not. It's not awkward at all, because I have to say I've met some amazing people through webcamming, because it's very open-minded. People go there. There will always be assholes no matter where you are, but most of the times it's positive. So I would just have fun dancing. I can do whatever I want. And I was like, hey, you know what? I'm just with these open-minded people, 2-3 hours a day. I'm having fun, just sexually. I'm having fun, dancing, strip and teasing, using, different dildos, the vibrators. I was like, wow, this is heaven. So I really love it. I still do webcamming, by the way, but not as much as I used to. And around this time when we met, I also started discovering. The funny thing is, I started webcamming before I did nude photography, because for me, webcamming was sort of still behind closed door. It's sort of like a niche. Not everybody knows what webcamming is. Not everybody goes and goes out to have like some interaction. And most of my webcamming sessions have been just about talking, listening to the other person, about talking about sexual things, like, their fetishes, their desires, about what they're doing in their daytime. Most of it has been like this, the way we are talking, but with a sexual aspect to it.
Okay.
Sort of like this. I was like, okay, that's nice. And I love to talk and interact. And around this time, I started doing photography, like taking photos of landscapes, macro photography. And I knew David did photography. And I was like, I one day asked him, hey, why don't you take my photos? He took my photos, and in the beginning, I told him not to post it in case somebody sees me naked. Even though I was doing webcamming, because for me, the webcamming was still like a private sphere. And with the nude, you're like exposed. Because, with the webcamming, it's not recorded, no nothing. So you just do it. And it felt more private in a way. And then I did my nude shootings. I started doing my nude shootings with David, and I felt really like liberated. I was like, wow, I really love this. And in the beginning, I told him, you can post those photos, but don't mention me by name. And then the more I became the more experience I gained, the more freer I became. I was like, you know what? I don't care if people see my photos. Who should, if they see my photos, so what? They see breasts, bottom, legs, so what? It's just human. And I'm not going to hide anything now. I didn't leave Islam for just to be in another prison, and the prison of society. And so I started sharing those photos around this time that we met. But I didn't tell much about my background.
It's interesting for me to see you through the lens of Twitter, where you just first kind of posted these very artistic, erotic, sometimes black and white nude photos of yourself. And then
Yeah.
so I'm seeing these, on your Twitter, in my Twitter feed every now and again. It's like, oh, look, there's nude Yasmeena again, and then suddenly it got you started doing these kind of S&M
Yeah.
videos where you would be tied up and
Yeah.
whipped or things, and then suddenly in recent the last few months, now I
Yeah.
see pornography, that you went into
Yeah.
pornography.
That's the way it is with freedom. The more you have freedom, the freer you become. The more there is. You either stop everything, or you're hungry for more. You want to have more of that. You want to explore your freedom. And the thing is, for me, because I had experience with webcamming, and I started doing BDSM because I love spanking. And through the story of O, it's a really good book, actually, and it's written by a woman. Can you believe it? In the beginning, when the book was out, everybody thought it was a man, but it was actually a woman who wrote the book. The story of O, and there's a film, and it's just about a woman's uh, sexual adventure, but with a BDSM twist. And it's not like 50 Shades of Grey, where there is this baggage of his poor background, and you know what I mean. Not everybody comes from that background, and even if, like, you genuinely enjoy the interaction, the role plays, and I watched it and I was like, wow, that's fascinating. It's really fascinating. I don't know how it is, but I have to try. If I want to know, I have to try. I kind of have an opinion of something if I don't read about it or I don't experience it. Because for me, I didn't want to be like the way I was before in the UK, accepting everything and just not questioning it. So I questioned it. I was like, you know what? Let's see. Let's see. Come, like, I was embracing it, and I started it, and I was like, wow, I love this. I love this interaction, this submissive, dominant thing. And I was like, wow, it would be nice to do this also, like, on photos. So I started doing some photos, and then I was playing with the idea of doing it on video. I was like, you know what? Are there any companies or anybody who's doing it? I would love to work with them. Because, at this time I was still, so David was, his full-time job, it was and is photography and videography. And mine was, in the beginning, I had nothing. And then I discovered, hey, I love this. I could have gone into further studies. But then I was like, no, I'm not going to go into study now, because I want to find out who I am. I'm not going to jump right into studying and then miss out on the fun. So I was like, okay, studies can wait for a later date. First of all, I'm going to find out who I am. So I started experimenting with BDSM, and I really liked it. And I started applying for companies and started shooting with them. And then it went into sort of soft porn, because it's a transition. I didn't want to jump straight into, some people do this. The moment they start doing nude, they go straight into, let's say, double penetration. And for me, I was like, I'm not going to do something just because maybe it pays more, or because first of all, I don't need the money. I can do anything I want. I can make anywhere, wherever I do, whatever I do, I will be successful at it. But will I have fun? Because I really like being in front of the camera. I really like interacting with the lens. And I love to use my body to express myself. And I was like, you know what? Let me give it a try professionally and see how it goes. If I don't like it, I can quit anytime. I know the photos will be online, but who cares? I was like this, and I'm not going to work with children or anything like that anyway, so I don't care. about the consequences. Because, when you start porn, you kind of work in certain jobs afterwards. Um, in some countries, for example, you kind of work in certain jobs. And I was like, I don't care, because first of all, I don't like kids and I don't want to work with kids. Um, so for me, that's nothing important. And if somebody finds my videos, so what if they find my videos? Then I'm not going to work for a company or somebody who doesn't accept me for the way I am. So I knew of the consequences. So I went ahead with it, and I started doing solo videos in the beginning, so masturbation. And the companies that I applied to are very much like, they're considered feminist porn. So it's not uh, fake tits, or you know what I mean. It's not.
Is it a kind of the, like, for example, the lesbian porn that's directed to women, that kind of pornography?
Yeah, it's a mixture of both, actually. It's also directed towards guys, but
Mm.
it's based on the female pleasure.
Right.
And for me, I was like, if I'm gonna start, because I don't want to work with some bad company or whatever, because there is a stigma attached to porn. I want to have good experiences. I want to be with the right kind of people, and these companies are doing great work, and they're making a difference, of course. And I would love to be part of that change. So I applied to them, and I got in, and I started doing the solo videos. And then I was like, hey, you know what? I was very sexually open, regardless of gender. I never thought, oh, I'm heterosexual or I'm only attracted to guys. I can never think of being with a woman or having experience with a woman. I never had that, actually. So I was like, okay, you know what? Let me try. Maybe, because I'm curious. So I tried, and I was like, wow, I actually enjoy it. So I started doing girl, so lesbian porn. And that was for a year. I just did lesbian porn for a year, along with my BDSM, with the webcamming, with the nude photography. So it's just like four different jobs in one. And then I slowly started. And during this time, I really had lost the patience with those community. The group that we started out with, they were very messy, and so it was like petty fights. And I was like, some of these atheist groups are just really, really bad, actually.
I
Um,
think it's not just the group we were. It's that it's trying to form communities in online through Twitter, through YouTube. I find that's not very effective, especially if there's a lot of people who are not as serious about doing it as others. There are people who want to stay anonymous and just be silly and trollish, and I think it just depends
yeah,
who you interact with. So I think I just got it. I
yeah,
mean, it's not a. I don't want to sound like it's a sense of superiority. It's just different. Like what I want. I got online and immediately I was never anonymous. I wanted to put my face out there. I wanted to put my real name out there, and I wanted to take seriously what I was doing. And that's not necessarily what everybody wanted to do. A lot of people don't want it, and that's fine too. I mean, everybody treats the internet however they want to use it, but I felt like I wanted to do something different from the others. So that's I think I never really had too much conflict actually with the group. I just noticed there was a lot of kind of immaturity and silliness, and again, that's fine. But I wanted to lean towards
yeah,
actually putting my voice out there to, and that and it took me a while to discover what I like, what how I wanted to do it. Like, what am I doing online? And I started to discover like female activists, Middle Eastern activists, activists for secularism, and I've now centered my podcast and everything I do around that, and trying to read books by activists and then interview them about the books. But it took me a long time to figure out what my world is, what my voice is, what my medium is, and that takes a while. So and I think a lot of people maybe are on that journey sometimes still.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. And during this time, while you were going through this, I was going through the same things. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, it was, like the communities that I was part of, not that they were toxic or anything, but like you said, I wasn't taking it too seriously, but it was sort of immaturish. For me, I was
Mm.
interested in philosophy. I was interested in having genuine discussions, for example, about death or about the universe,
Right.
such things. And a lot of those people were just so immature, and it would just go into petty fights, or bitching about.
Well,
And I was
I mean,
like,
the thing is like we're all from very different places, different backgrounds, and different ages, right? Like it can be a 50-year-old
that's
talking
it. Yeah,
with 15-year-olds sometimes, and you wouldn't even know it because sometimes they're anonymous. So
yeah,
you have a 15-year-old in the United States talking with a 50-year-old in France, and they're from totally different backgrounds. It's they're not necessarily going to get along, right? So it can get
absolutely.
messy.
Yeah.
It can get messy. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I was like, and you may remember, during this time, for example, I did like a video actually with the words "fuck Islam" on my bum.
Yeah,
I'm
you
not sure
did.
if you'd remember, right?
I saw. Yeah, I definitely remember a video with the words written "fuck Islam" on your butt.
On my bum,
I
yeah,
could not forget that. Trust me.
with the hijab, and I was
Yeah, with the
reciting
hijab
the
on. Yeah,
Quran.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I was reciting the surah. Yeah,
yeah.
in the beginning, and then it turned into, and it was with videos of ISIS in the video, clips of ISIS in the video integrated, sort of like, like committing blasphemy, And for me, I was like, at that point, and then I was like, you know what? I really started focusing, like you, I was serious about my work, about art, about expressing myself through my body, because I just find it really liberating. And like you, I also noticed, around this time that you had more and more structure at the same time that I was developing. So I was like, wow, you have a podcast now, that's amazing. And the fact that you became more precise and more structured with your themes. I mean, I noticed this. And I was like, wow, that's amazing to see how much we have changed. And not everybody changes, of course. But it was inspiring for me. And for me, it was also like, hey, wow, that's amazing. You know what? I love photography. I love modeling. Maybe this could be something. Maybe this could be my full time job. And it is now my full time job, Uh, so I was. It has been really a long journey, and then I slowly from girl I went into hardcore, so boy girl porn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, at the moment, I haven't done any anal or DP shoots because for me, I always take things one step at a time.
Me neither.
I take things one step at a time because, there may be girls who join the industry because they need the money or whatever, And for me, it's like, I understand, of course, it's so much, the work is so much better than working for 40 hours a week somewhere, of course. You get paid better, but it's not so much money that that you do something maybe you're not comfortable with, in the long run, if you're not comfortable with it, but you still do it, if you don't like it, it's not a good idea. Actually, you can still do something maybe where you don't feel this way. But for me, I luckily, thank God, didn't have this. Most of the people I've met are doing in this industry because they really enjoy it. You always have those people who don't like their jobs, whether it's in an office or somewhere else, So I started taking, in the beginning, I wasn't taking it that seriously. I was sort of like, hey, it's fun, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't really know much about social, although I was using social media, but I didn't know about the strategy or doing postings or what to write. I was just crazy. There was no structure. And I became more mature. And I was like, hey, I really like this. Maybe I need to change something. Maybe I need a website, And I started building my own website. And you see that occasionally I do discuss things like veganism, atheism, politics on my Twitter. But you also see my other work. So mainly my work, my professional work. And before it was the other way around. Before I would occasionally post a nude photo, and mostly I was discussing with people who never cared for a discussion, So it was just pointless. And now I only have discussions with people who really are genuine, who want to hear my side or just a different opinion, and we just talk about it on one,
It's kind of
There
like
is
we went
no,
from softcore atheism to hardcore atheism, right, in a way,
yeah,
right? We took it more seriously.
yeah.
We took it
We took
further.
it we took it way more, and I started building my own website, and I started with Boygar last year, end of last year. So you see, it took me some time, and for me, people write to me saying, "Ah, Yasmeena, when are you gonna do anal? Or we want to see you with legal porno and everything, like like this." And I'm like, you know what, guys? I'll do what I want when I want. There is like, I'm not gonna do something now just because you want to see me this way. I understand you like my work, and I appreciate that, the support, but I'm not gonna do something that I'm not ready yet to do, or why do I, you know what I mean? I don't want to fall into that pit of doing something that I'm not comfortable with. So, or I'm not comfortable with yet, or I haven't explored yet. So I'm taking things very easy with my work. I built my own company with David. We're producing now content for my website, yasmeenax.com. So we're producing BDSM, soft and hardcore videos, photo sets, and it's running really nicely, because we have uh, our own ideas that we put into the videos, and I'm directing the videos. Basically, I'm producing it. David is just filming. Um, so filming with different guys, filming by myself or outdoors, always with sort of like a sexual aspect to it, but not cheesy, natural, the way I am, just being me. And then I have worked for other companies. So I travel a lot to Germany, to Switzerland, to Prague, to Budapest, working with different companies, also doing my nude shooting tours, and also going to events like Berlin Venus. So it's an erotic festival, just to communicate with people. And it's really running good. And I really enjoy it because I'm doing something I love. And the more, the older I become, the more I realize how lucky I am to have found something I enjoy. And of course, I also use religion in this too, because you may have seen that for one of my videos, I used the hijab.
Yeah, I saw it. That was interesting. Does that make you afraid at all to do that kind of thing, to get threats?
You know what? I'm not afraid, actually. The only thing I'm afraid of is myself. I'm not afraid of anything. In the beginning, I would say I was afraid, but I thought that because it is really an irrational fear that you have in the beginning. Fear of what? One day we all have to die. And I'd rather die fighting for my freedoms, for my rights, than obey, than be submissive and be treated like a sex slave. So for me, it's like, because I already had that journey, I know what hell is like. Nothing can surprise me anymore. Because if your own parents treat you like shit, if a stranger does it, it's in the beginning less. If your parents tell you something harmful, um, it's more. It has more of an impact.
I have a lot of questions for you.
Yes.
So
Uh,
it's really typical these days, especially this new kind of, because feminism, I think a few decades ago was very much about sexual liberation and women being very open with their bodies, because there was that very Christian conservative mentality in so much of the West. But now I guess some people use the term sex negative, and there's this idea of objectification, and pretty much any showing of the female body in any popular medium now is considered an objectification of the woman. So
yeah.
I think a lot of women, feminists especially, not maybe not all of it, it could depend on the kind of feminist they are, but there are a lot of feminists who might say that you went from a patriarchal society that forced you to cover, and now you're just being objectified for men's pleasure. And so that's still a kind of slavery. And I hear that kind of thing all the time. Like, this is, this woman who's exposing herself for the pleasure of men, she's objectified. It's a form of slavery. You're not free either. How would you respond to that kind of stuff?
Actually, I don't care about what they say, but I will respond, actually, because what do they expect of me? To dress up and start wearing a veil and a hijab to cover up? The thing is, in terms of objectification, we live in this society that we live in. You are judged on who you are. The first thing when you look at, you cannot read people's minds. So you have eye contact. That moment, you judge. that moment when you go to a job interview, it's sort of like it's easy to blame people who do porn, who do sex work, because there is this stigma attached to it. I'm a sex positive. I still call myself a feminist, but a sex positive feminist. I love sex, and why should I care about what people think? And I don't care about doing it for men's pleasure. It's not about this. I do it for my own pleasure. I love sex, and if they are not happy about this, then I can't help them, but I'm not going to start covering up. It's basically it's not so different than what the Taliban demand. That's the one thing that those so-called feminists, or less misguided feminists, let me use the right term here, and the Taliban have in common: hate for women's bodies, because I don't hate myself. I love myself. I love to have sex on camera. I enjoy it, whether it's with women. As I said, I'm very selective with who I work with. So I really have fun, regardless of what gender I'm working with, regardless of the gender of my partner. But I, of course, care about that partner's pleasure, because this is how relationships or human interactions work. So now I'm not going to start hiding and covering up just because they are afraid of sex, of sexuality, because the thing is, that's a sign of an oppressive mentality that they probably have, because the moment you are sexually suppressed, that it cannot be a free society, because you cannot be yourself. Every society that is sexually oppressed, you've seen the state of those societies. We are back into, I don't know, 7th century Arabia. And people will always say that, but you're objectifying yourself. You know what? I enjoy it. I enjoy showing my body. I have a lot of fun, and the pleasure is for me. And if they don't like it, they can go to hell.
How do you feel about this fetishization now in Western community of the hijab, where they're saying, like, both there's some Muslim women saying in the West, and there's a lot of Western feminists eating up the narrative that the hijab is empowering, it's feminist, it gives them an advantage over other people in a society because they're not being judged by how they look. And now you go into a Mac store. This happened to me recently, where there's this huge poster of a woman in a hijab. They're putting they're making Nike swoosh hijabs. They're making Barbies with hijab. How do you see that?
I think that's madness, and this is to do with the so-called, this is because of us, actually, in Western society. We tolerate things that shouldn't be tolerated. Forcing your 3-year-old daughter to wear the hijab just because you think, because she's to blame. If a man rapes her, a 4-year-old, who's to blame? They will blame the woman or the child, saying that she's the one who didn't dress up. Women are not lollipops. You may have seen this photo of a packed lollipop with an unwrapped lollipop and flies. Women are not lollipops or anything like that. They're the ones who are sexually hungry, sexually suppressed people. They're the ones with the dirty mind, with this background. So I find it really disgusting that it's called empowering. I mean, I will say one thing, though. This is why I wear the hijabs in some of my shoots. It is empowering, but with my legs spread and the Quran in between. That's the only time that the hijab is empowering. But the thing is, too often women are forced to wear those. They're made to wear those. In which Muslim majority country is secular, is a champion of women's rights? So which one has signed the Human Rights Declaration, UN Human Rights Declaration? It's really madness, and it's just the normalization of something that is so crazy. It's just like circumcision of boys, of girls. The next thing will be forced marriages that would be normalized by Westerners, because they don't want to be labeled, and they want to be so tolerant. You cannot be so tolerant, actually. I'm not tolerant of beliefs that that say that I should be killed because I don't believe, or that I should be thrown off a building because I'm bisexual. I cannot be tolerant of such intolerant beliefs. And I think we need to take a stance. And if you want to wear a hijab in a Western society, there should be a law saying over 18 or something, just like as you can get married under 18. We have to protect those women. But it's really crazy. And it's, as I said, the hijab belongs in the brothel, or when I'm wearing it in my videos with my legs spread wide apart.
Yeah, and
that's empowering.
And feminists often use the idea of just, well, if it's a choice, it's fine. But choices are not always good. You can make bad choices. For example, the Muslim girls and boys who went to join ISIS as a choice. I mean, that's a horrible choice. And is that a choice that should be respected only because it's a free choice? Well, no. And I think an excellent example of how complicated the idea of women and empowerment and combined with the freedom of choices, for example, your mother, that,
Yeah.
she wasn't in a against everything that was happening to her. She chose, a lot of it was a choice, and that she embraced on some level. Now, if a person heard your story and heard what your mother said, okay, you can say, well, yeah, it's her choice. Does that mean what she was saying and what she was doing was good for her or for her children or for women? I would say no. So it's not as simple as just saying, well, it's a choice. Because there are things that people choose. There are things that people have been indoctrinated into that are not just not good. It's extremely harmful, and it's not good for women.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that many of these things are not even choices. It looks like a choice. For Muslims who are living in Muslim majority countries, there is no choice, for sure not.
Yeah.
But for Muslims who are living in European countries, so in Europe, and or in America, there is a choice, but sometimes it looks like a choice. Okay, there may be a genuine choice where the parents are very secular, whatever, but that's a very rare case. Because, often you don't hear about it. You're not meant to talk. You're not meant to speak about the problems. That's how you don't know. But
right.
Because, for example, I don't know that I could go to the police for help because I was told I cannot. I should not talk about my life to other people, about my feelings. So you suppress those emotions. And can you imagine the number of Muslim children who are indoctrinated in mosques? I mean, those people who went to join ISIS, they didn't join ISIS just because they woke up one day and said, oh, God, I will come to you. No, they met people in mosques. They came across people who told them all these things. Okay, they could have known better, of course, but not all of them had that choice. It is a choice, but that's the only choice they were offered.
Right. I often say there can be no freedom of choice if there's no freedom of thought. And for example, what happened in the situation you were in, you weren't allowed on any level to have any control over your life, friends, information, reading, going out, so many basic things that allow you to have freedom of thought and expand your mind and expand your social circles. And if you don't have that, how can you say a person is choosing anything?
Yeah, for me, I didn't choose a hijab. My parents told me from a young age, that's my identity. I didn't choose, basically I chose nothing because they chose for me. And they said it was my choice. And I bought into it because I had nothing else.
Well, that's the interesting thing. You bought into it, right? I mean, there was a moment there where maybe I would have talked with that Yasmeena, and if I asked her, is all this a choice? Is this hijab a choice? Is this lifestyle a choice? Maybe you would have said yes, right?
I would have said, and I actually did say yes, because I had at that time when I was on Twitter, I met somebody he was like an activist, and we had a podcast talk. And I was telling him, defending him, saying it's my choice, whatever. And in that moment, I was thinking, actually, it's not really, I've been made, I cannot really tell him my real thoughts. Because how would I look? I'm going to be seen as a traitor. I'm going to be seen as, oh, I'm not pious. I'm not being a good Muslim. And I felt guilty for feeling these thoughts. You're made to be afraid of your own thoughts, of your own doubts. And I most likely would have said yes at that time. But deep down inside, I couldn't have told you my feelings because I couldn't have trusted you with my feelings, because this is the fear that they teach you, to be afraid. You know, when you look at the hadiths, when you look at the Qurans, the way they describe kafirs, I mean non-believers, the way they describe Christians and Jews, basically you cannot trust them. This is the thing, mentality. So you cannot really know how I'm feeling. You wouldn't know because I wouldn't tell you. I wouldn't trust you enough to tell you my feelings. But the older I became, the more clearer it became to me that what my parents did was a violation of every right. And it's not right. And I cannot live my life like that. And you know what? They learned a big lesson from me. I think my parents are suffering to this day because I dishonored them, as they say. I shamed them. And, you know, I'm very content and very happy about that, because it's time that people like me, like other ex-Muslims, other people who are in situations, that we teach these people that this is how it works and this is what doesn't work. That's the only way to, you know, you cannot preach to the sheep. You have to show it. And the way I show it is through my work, through my porn, you know?
Well, I mean, what you're doing now, we do obviously really different things, but I love the fact that I've had the opportunity, just because we discovered each other so early. If not, I wouldn't probably follow a person for porn, but I got to see you evolve in
Yeah.
you know, in this, also, like you were saying about me, that you got to see me evolve into this more mature and more professional manner online, and I got to see the same thing from you, and I get to see that you know, you're doing what you love, and you're doing it the best you can, and that you love what you're doing. And that's been also,
That's it.
you know, that's been really inspiring. And I knew some of a little bit about your background, but then just seeing everything you're doing and knowing that contradiction in your background just really made me want to talk to you and get to know you more, because, if you know, it's just been super busy, but it's been fascinating. And you've had the experience of being on the spectrum of a woman's experience all the way to the extremes. And
yes, thank you.
And it's inspiring to hear from you, because I think you have so much to say about sexuality and being a woman in a person who has been tied down and covered up in the most extreme manner pretty much existing on earth, and then liberating yourself again to the most extreme manner. I mean, yeah, you do nothing halfway, Yasmeena. I love that.
You know, for me, I never leave a job unfinished. So no matter what is blowjob or whatever, I finish the job. So for me, thank you for your kind words. And that's you know, I love to show to people as well, you know, look, if you can have freedom, you only have to stop thinking about it, just do it. I'm enjoying my life. I'm leading my life on my terms. And I'm very independent, and I've met some wonderful people, and I get a lot of messages from Muslims, by the way, who watch my porn, who tell me, you know what, it's admirable what you're doing. I can't believe it. I would never be able to do what you're doing, but you have opened my eyes and I support you. So they secretly send me those messages supporting me, but they cannot openly support me. And then, of course, there's always those assholes too who write to me, and then I engage, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to be silent. I'm not going to be ashamed of who I am. Take it or leave it. And what I would like to say too is to those so-called Muslim feminists, you know, in terms of choice, you know, if you give somebody freedom, they will never return back to the caves. If they're truly in a situation where they have freedom, nobody will go back to the chains, to the cage. For sure not. That's the thing. For me, it was like this, you know, once you taste freedom, it's a drug. You want more of it. You mold it, you shape it, you start thinking about things that you never thought thought were possible. And I'm so happy that I've had those experiences, even the bad experiences, because I wouldn't be where I am without those experiences.
You remind me of like the verses of the song from Bob Marley that I always really like, and you always speaking to people like you, it always reminds me of the verses where he says, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds," and that's completely you. You emancipated yourself from mental slavery completely on your own and freed your own
Yeah.
mind. And it sounds it was completely an independent action, and it sounds like nobody could ever really keep you down throughout your life. It sounds like you had that innate curiosity and skepticism your whole life.
Yes, and it really continues. My thoughts are more developed, more structured. I've learned new languages. I've learned so much more about myself. Met so many people from different cultures, and also, more about the sexual side as well. Because you are only truly free if you're sexually free. It's not just the mental aspect of it. So it's also the spiritual, physical being as well that has to be free. And it is a very, very hard and long fight, but you should never give up. That's the thing. For me, I have sometimes days where I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing in my life? I have those days, of course. But I fight it. You have to fight it. It's a constant struggle. And also, I do get, as I said before, hateful messages. And for me, they don't affect me. I see so many women getting affected just by some asshole writing, oh, you have small tits or whatever, And then the next thing they do is get a surgery just because that guy said something. And for me, I get these messages too under my postings. And I'm like, you know what? I don't give a fuck. Keep watching my porn. Thanks for the views, So that's it. I don't take them seriously. I just love to play cat and mouse with a few of them. But they cannot affect me. They cannot hurt me. And that's what makes them even more angry, especially the Muslim men.
Yeah, there's something you said there that I feel like we could do like a 3-hour podcast just on that. Is something I've talked about, but I never get really the chance to talk about it too much because you don't see it with a mainstream criticism of Islam too much. And that's the point that I think so many of the problems in fundamentalist Islam, and this could go for almost every religion that becomes fundamentalist and is practiced too orthodoxly, is the repression of sex. And you don't you're not going to hear too many mainstream philosophical intellectual critics of Islam and atheists get into the conversation that when they're talking about for example, when they talk about what is the mental structure, how is it that we get suicide bombers or that we get terrorism, or why are these societies so angry? And it's always back to Quran verses and philosophy and psychology, but I very rarely hear the reference, which I think is essential, and that is the repression of sex. And it could be maybe because I have I'm Hispanic and I live in Latin America, that there is I think a more healthy attitude towards sex and being open about sex, that maybe even these intellectuals still refrain from talking about it, or they don't consider it an intellectual exercise to bring it up. Perhaps, I'm not sure, but I'm positive that the repression of sex, both for men and women in fundamentalist Islam or religion, creates anger and creates resentment and creates unstableness and bad relationships between men and women. And if you teach boys since the day they're born that you cover up the women where they can't even see them, they're told pornography is evil, they're told sex is evil. If I had grown up like that, and I think about I would hate myself anytime I would have seen pornography or a naked woman, or and I had no chance of seeing nude women, I probably would have blown myself up too. I think most guys would. It's not surprising. And that's rarely talked about, is that a lot of this has to do with not just being promised 72 virgins, but repressing men from sex and interaction with women, and then the only time they're told that they're going to have any interaction with women is in the afterlife. That's a big deal. That's a
Yeah.
huge factor in why we see so much misogyny in these communities, and it's very unfortunate that it's not seen as an intellectual exercise to dig in to the sexual repression side of it, because I almost never hear about that. Don't you agree? Like, it's like,
Yeah,
like you were
I
talking
agree.
about all the atheist intellectuals you've heard. I mean, how often do they say, like, is there a chapter in their book about just
Nope,
sex? And you don't
nothing.
see that. And I don't back away from that. But I mean, imagine also just repressing, especially men. I'm sorry, but men, you
Yeah.
just repress that sex like to nothing, and men go psycho. It's like it's
And
there's a movie
yeah,
just about a guy who I forget the name of the movie, but I don't know if you saw it, but there's a movie about a guy who tries to go 1 month, I think, maybe two,
yeah,
without masturbating, and it shows him going slowly crazy. And I mean, that's really telling when there's a movie about a man just trying not to masturbate for a month and he loses his mind. Imagine these Muslim societies, right?
yeah.
Where it's just like this.
You know,
Yeah.
that's it. And in these Muslim societies, for example, you cannot, maybe in Europe, yes, but for example, in Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, you cannot be seen, only when you're maybe not in the country as a man, you cannot be seen having sex outside of your marriage, because you will also get punished. Maybe not as much as the woman, but you still get punished. You still care about your image and the quote marks. So yeah, when you grow up with this, like as I said, my mother, for example, she taught uh, more than my father did, by the way. My brothers, look, it's okay to hit women. It's okay to do this and that. And I had seen my youngest brother, going from the values that I taught him, to treat people with respect, even though I was believing at that time, to treat people with respect, be decent. He went from that angel to an asshole within just like 1 or 2 years. He was like 9 years old, and he was already swearing and hitting my youngest sister, or trying to hit me, because he saw it's acceptable. It's this cycle that continues. It's not just, of course, women, we go through more than men, but of course men in these societies too suffer. They cannot be happy. Being sexually suppressed means your personality is suppressed. You are expected to marry as well. Against, you cannot, you have more of a choice, but still you are expected. You have to be circumcised. You have to, there are all these expectations as well, of guys. It's a vicious cycle. They go hand in hand, actually. That's how patriarchy works. If it wasn't for that, because it cannot be just positive for men in their perspective, even if in the long run they think, okay, I will have sex with my wife whenever I want, but they're not mentally happy. They cannot be. Really, they cannot be. And that's the thing. And the other aspect is that the advantage that men have in Islam in comparison to women, maybe for other cultures not, but in Islam in particular, men can marry up to 4 women, and a woman cannot. So he's got 4 different women to have sex with whenever he wants. And he can divorce the one he wants to, whenever he wants to, and marry another one. That would be 4 again. And Muhammad, for example, he's the perfect example to look at. Not perfect in that sense, but under quote marks. That if we want to see how Islam is, we just have to go to Muhammad. He had so many wives. He married and raped a 9-year-old. Because he was in that sexually suppressed society, and he says, "Hey, I'm a prophet. I can do whatever I want," And men in Islam think along those lines. But of course, in the long term, they will never be happy. And when you look at the stories of some ex-Muslim men, what they have gone through, what they were expected, to do, it's really sad what's going on. And that's the only way we can change it. We have to acknowledge both sufferings, and we have to say, no, enough is enough, and we have to stand together.
Definitely. Well, we've been talking for quite a while. I don't want this video to
Yeah,
be too long. Even though it's long, I think it was absolutely wonderful. You were
same here.
amazing.
Thank you. You too.
I think there's a lot more we could talk about, so I'd love to have you on again.
Definitely. And I really like this idea of talking about the sexual repression in Islamic societies. I think that's a really good topic.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
I haven't come across that before.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that's delved into, and it should be. There should be books just about that. There should be papers just about that. That should be a major topic, and it's very unfortunate. And I think just your story highlights that aspect so much, and you're the embodiment of sexual liberation in a lot of ways.
Thank you.
And Yasmeena Ali is absolutely gorgeous. She's wonderful. You can hear that how intelligent and enlightened she is. So please talk about your social media and where people can follow you.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It has been a pleasure. And I look forward to doing this again. So you can follow me on my Twitter at Yasmeena Model. That's YASMEENA Model MODEL. And the same is for my Instagram, Yasmeena Model. So yeah, those are the two platforms you can really find me on. I'm very active on Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you, Yasmeena, for being on.
Thank you so much. Take care.